Jerry couldn't remember the last time he had a good day at work. The dealership had always been his life, but recently, it felt more like a weight he couldn't shake off. Every morning, he dragged himself out of bed, got into his car, and made the 30-minute drive to the same old lot, with the same old routine. It was always the same faces, fellow employees who had long since stopped trying, customers who had no patience for anything less than perfection, and an overwhelming sense of monotony that crept into his soul. Today, however, was different. Or, at least, it started that way. The sun was already high in the sky when Jerry pulled into the dealership parking lot. He parked in his usual spot, the far corner closest to the service area, and stepped out of his car with a sigh. The lot was unusually quiet for a Saturday morning, and he couldn't help but wonder if the rest of the staff had decided to call in sick, leaving him alone to deal with the inevitable influx of customers. As Jerry walked into the showroom, he was greeted by the familiar sound of the sales floor buzzing with idle chatter. He gave a nod to a few of the salespeople, his eyes quickly scanning the space. That's when he saw him. A man, tall and broad-shouldered, standing by the rows of shiny cars, seemingly lost in thought. The man was wearing sunglasses, a casual white t-shirt, and black athletic shorts, but there was something about him that set him apart from the usual crowd. He looked like he belonged in a more expensive place than this. Jerry took a closer look. The man had a calm demeanor, but the confidence was hard to miss. There was an aura about him, like he was used to people paying attention. He wasn't the kind of guy you'd ignore. Jerry took a mental note to keep an eye on him. As he walked up to the man, he noticed the way the salespeople were suddenly more animated. They straightened up, wiped their hands on their pants, and hurried toward the customer. But Jerry? He didn't move. He had been here for too long, and he was tired of playing the game. If this guy wanted to buy a car, he'd have to go through Jerry, end of story. "Can I help you, sir?" Jerry asked, his voice flat and almost rehearsed. He couldn't muster much enthusiasm. Not today. The man turned toward him, and that's when Jerry saw his face clearly. It was strikingly familiar, but Jerry couldn't place it. He thought for a second, but his mind was foggy, his brain struggling to connect the dots. "I'm just looking around," the man replied, his deep voice rumbling through the air. Jerry nodded, trying to push the feeling of unease aside. "Well, if you need any help, just let me know. We have some great deals today," he added, gesturing vaguely to the cars around them. The man looked at him, almost as if he were sizing Jerry up. He didn't respond immediately, just stared for a moment, before casually asking, "Do you work here?" The question caught Jerry off guard. Of course, he worked here. He had worked here for over 5 years. He opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, the man continued, "Are you sure?" There it was again. That feeling of being under a microscope. "Yeah," Jerry said, his words clipped. "I'm Jerry, the manager here." "Ah, Jerry," the man said with a knowing nod, though there was a glint of something playful in his eyes. "Nice to meet you. I'm just browsing for now. No need to worry about me." "Okay," Jerry said, taking a step back. He didn't know why, but he felt slightly irked by the encounter. It wasn't the man himself, no, there was something about the way he had asked those simple questions that made Jerry uneasy. As Jerry started to walk away, he heard the man say, almost as an afterthought, "I might be interested in a couple of cars." Jerry paused, turned, and looked at him. There was something about the statement that felt like a challenge. Was the guy trying to be coy? Or was he genuinely interested in buying a car? "You know what? Let me know if you need anything," Jerry said, his tone still distant, though a bit more curt now. "I've got plenty of cars to show you." The man simply nodded, but Jerry could have sworn he saw a smirk tug at the corner of his lips. It was a smile that didn't belong here, like he was in on some joke that Jerry wasn't. Jerry headed back to his office, a little shaken. His thoughts were scattered, but he couldn't help but feel like he'd just missed something important. He was supposed to be the manager, the one in charge, but somehow, this stranger had thrown him off his game. It was ridiculous. Jerry had dealt with far worse customers before. What was it about this guy that felt different? As he sat at his desk and flipped through some paperwork, he tried to shake off the unsettling feeling. The man was probably just another one of those high rollers who thought they could get whatever they wanted. If he wanted to buy a car, Jerry was sure he'd sell it to him. But Jerry wasn't about to get overly excited about a potential sale. Not today. But something kept nagging at him. There was a sense of wrongness in how he had dealt with the man earlier, and he couldn't shake it. Maybe it was the way the guy had looked at him, or the way he'd spoken. Either way, Jerry wasn't sure how to feel about it. Maybe it was nothing. But then again, maybe it was something. "Hey, Jerry," one of the salesmen knocked on his door and poked his head in. "The guy you were talking to earlier, he's got a checkbook out." Jerry frowned. "What? Who?" "The guy in the black shorts. Big guy. Sunglasses," the salesman said. "He's ready to buy." Jerry blinked. What the hell? The guy was serious. He didn't even know if he wanted to sell him a car. He hadn't even bothered to find out what the guy wanted. But here he was, already prepared to make a purchase. "Well," Jerry muttered, pushing his chair back, "I guess I'll go talk to him." It was then that Jerry walked back into the showroom, where the man stood at the counter, calmly writing a check. Jerry felt his stomach drop as realization hit him. This wasn't just any customer. This was someone with power, someone who wasn't to be underestimated. But he had no idea how much that moment would change everything. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Jerry sat at his desk, staring blankly at the piles of paperwork before him. The quiet buzz of the showroom filled the air as he sifted through another stack of dealer reports, glancing occasionally at the clock on the wall. It wasn't that Jerry hated his job, but the passion that had once burned inside him seemed to have burned out over the years. Everything had become routine, predictable, a never-ending loop of dealing with customers who wanted everything but were never satisfied with anything. It wasn't always like this, though. Jerry had once been excited about working in the car business. He had started here straight out of college, eager and hungry to prove himself. Back then, the dealership was a place where he felt he could make a real difference. He'd always had a knack for sales, and his natural charisma helped him climb the ranks quickly. Within just a few years, he was promoted to manager, a position that many people would have killed for. But now, the shine had worn off. His enthusiasm was gone, replaced by the quiet despair that came from working at a place where no one cared. The dealership was struggling, and it seemed that every month brought a new problem. Whether it was low sales, high turnover, or constant complaints from the corporate office, Jerry was always the one called in to fix things. But no matter how hard he tried, nothing seemed to improve. The passion had evaporated, and the spark he once had for the job was extinguished. Jerry's relationship with his employees had also shifted. At first, he had tried to be a mentor to them, teaching them how to close deals and work the floor with ease. But as time passed, he grew tired of being the boss and found it easier to keep his distance. The bond he had once shared with his team had slowly deteriorated into one of mere convenience. He no longer cared to sit down with the new hires and give them advice. Instead, he would retreat to his office, away from the chaos of the showroom, hoping the day would end as quickly as possible. And then there were the customers. Jerry used to enjoy the challenge of working with them, finding the right car for the right person. But now, it felt like a never-ending battle. Every customer seemed entitled, expecting discounts and perks as if they were the only ones with needs. Jerry had grown cynical, seeing the same attitudes day in and day out. The hard sell became a routine he barely tolerated. His passion for matching people with cars had been replaced by a growing resentment of the industry itself. As he looked back on his life, Jerry couldn't help but wonder where it all went wrong. He had once been ambitious, eager to make a name for himself. He had hoped that his hard work would pay off with a nice house, a new car, and a future full of possibilities. But all of that seemed so distant now. He was still stuck in the same place, working at a job he no longer cared for, living in a small apartment that reminded him of his failures. What had happened to him? The answer, of course, was the same as it always had been: life. The reality of paying bills, dealing with customers, and maintaining the dealership's poor reputation had drained Jerry of his optimism. His friends had moved on to better careers, some even starting their own businesses. But Jerry? He had stayed, stuck in the same place, fighting battles that never seemed to end. As he sat back in his chair, Jerry thought about his family. His parents had always supported his career choice, proud that their son was in business. But they were getting older, and Jerry hadn't done much to make them proud in recent years. He hadn't moved up in the company, he hadn't saved enough money for a future, and he certainly hadn't done anything extraordinary. When he went home for holidays, his parents would ask about his job, and he would put on a smile and tell them everything was fine, even though he knew it wasn't. And then there was his brother, Mark. They had always been close growing up, sharing everything from school projects to weekend basketball games. But Mark had gone off to college, got a great job at a tech company, and married a woman who was everything Jerry had never been able to achieve. Every time Jerry saw Mark, he felt a twinge of jealousy. Mark had everything Jerry didn't. It made Jerry feel like he was stuck in some kind of holding pattern, unable to break free. The thoughts swirled in his head, but they didn't make anything clearer. Jerry's life was a tangle of regrets, missed opportunities, and unfulfilled potential. And now, it seemed, the dealership was just the latest reminder that life wasn't going according to plan. That was the reality Jerry had created for himself, a comfortable, but unremarkable existence. But today was different. Something about the encounter with the man in the showroom had disturbed him, and for the first time in a long while, Jerry found himself wondering if he was on the verge of something bigger. Something he couldn't yet understand. He glanced back at his desk, then looked up at the clock. It was nearly lunchtime. Jerry rubbed his eyes and decided to step out of his office for a while. He needed a break from the never-ending thoughts that seemed to cloud his mind. As he made his way through the showroom, he noticed the man from earlier again, standing at the counter with one of the salesmen. The man seemed completely at ease, as if he owned the place. Jerry didn't know why, but he couldn't shake the feeling that this was not just another random customer. Something about the way he carried himself was different, almost too confident. As Jerry passed by, he overheard part of the conversation. "Do you need anything else, sir?" the salesman asked. "No, I'm good. I'll take the keys to the black one," the man replied casually, as if he were buying a cup of coffee. Jerry stopped in his tracks. "Wait, you're buying a car?" The man turned around and smiled, a small, knowing grin on his face. "Yeah, why not?" Jerry felt a chill run down his spine. There it was again, that same unsettling feeling. He had never seen anyone so confident, so sure of themselves in this place. Can I help you with anything?" Jerry asked, his voice sounding more professional than he felt. The man looked at him, his eyes studying Jerry for a moment. "Actually, yes," he said. "I'm looking to buy this dealership." Jerry's mouth went dry. The words hung in the air, leaving him speechless. He thought he must have heard wrong. "You're what?" Jerry stammered, his heart suddenly racing. The man's grin widened. "I'm buying the whole place. Just wanted to let you know. I'm Shaquille O'Neal." Jerry froze. Shaquille O'Neal? The Shaq? The former basketball star? This wasn't just another customer. This man was here to change everything. And Jerry, completely unaware of what was coming next, had just made one of the worst mistakes of his career. Jerry stood there, frozen in place, his brain struggling to process the words he had just heard. Shaquille O'Neal. The name hit him like a freight train, but the reality was far harder to grasp. Shaq, the basketball legend, the towering figure who dominated the courts in the 90s and early 2000s, the man whose name had been plastered on every billboard, magazine, and TV commercial, it couldn't be. Could it? He looked at the man again, his mind racing to put the pieces together. The sunglasses, the easy confidence, the calm demeanor, suddenly, it all made sense. Shaq wasn't just another wealthy businessman, he was the man who could buy whatever he wanted, and now, it seemed, he had set his sights on Jerry's dealership. I don't think I understand, Jerry stammered, his voice cracking as the words tumbled out. You're the Shaquille O'Neal. Like, the Shaq. The man, Shaq, apparently, nodded casually, his grin still wide, almost amused at Jerry's shock. The one and only, he said, as though it were the most natural thing in the world. And I'm looking to expand my business ventures. This place seems like a good fit. Jerry's mind was a whirlwind of confusion, disbelief, and shock. He had heard of celebrities investing in businesses, sure, but he had never expected to meet one in his own dealership. It was almost too surreal to process. And what did he mean by expanding his business ventures? Was this just a publicity stunt? Was Shaq seriously interested in buying a car dealership? But before Jerry could ask any more questions, Shaq continued, his voice calm but with a hint of authority. I've done my research, Shaq said, leaning against the counter, still looking very much like the basketball legend everyone knew. This dealership has potential. It just needs the right leadership, the right direction. And I think I'm the man for the job. Jerry blinked, unable to comprehend fully what was happening. He had heard rumors about big money investors swooping in on struggling businesses, but this? This was something else entirely. I'm not sure I understand, Jerry repeated, still trying to wrap his head around the situation. You want to buy this dealership? Shaq gave a slow nod. Yes. That's exactly what I'm saying. I've been looking to branch out into different industries, and I see a lot of untapped potential here. You've got a solid team, and the location's great. It's a good base to work with. Jerry could hardly believe his ears. This was it, the moment everything changed. The dealership he had worked at for years, the dealership that had slowly worn him down over time, was being bought by one of the most famous athletes in the world. But there was something else, something Jerry couldn't shake off. He wasn't just dealing with a rich investor. He was dealing with someone who had far more power than he realized. Shaquille O'Neal wasn't just buying cars. He was buying control. The weight of the situation slowly dawned on Jerry, and panic began to creep into his thoughts. What did this mean for him? What did it mean for the future of the dealership? And most importantly, what would happen to his job? Before he could voice any of these concerns, Shaq continued with a nonchalant smile. I know this might come as a shock. But trust me, Jerry, you're going to be just fine. In fact, I'm planning to keep the team in place, including you. I want you to stay on board as the manager. We'll work together to turn things around. The words, you're going to be just fine, should have been reassuring, but they only added to the growing knot in Jerry's stomach. He wasn't sure if it was the excitement, the fear of the unknown, or the pressure of it all, but his nerves were on edge. I don't know what to say, Jerry managed to say, his voice trembling slightly. This is a lot to process. Shaq gave him a warm, understanding smile. Take your time. I'm not rushing you. But this is happening, Jerry. And I'd love for you to be a part of it. It was surreal. In all his years working in the dealership, Jerry never thought something like this could happen. Sure, there had been talk of mergers and buyouts over the years, but never anything this big, this unexpected. A celebrity coming in and taking over. That was the stuff of tabloid headlines, not something that happened in Jerry's mundane world. Okay, Jerry said, trying to steady his thoughts. But I don't even know where to begin. This is huge. Shaq nodded. I get it. You don't have to figure everything out today. Take some time, and let's talk more tomorrow. But just so you know, I'm serious about this. This isn't a publicity stunt. I'm here to make a real change. Jerry took a deep breath, trying to focus on the task at hand. This wasn't just any customer. This wasn't even a normal business transaction. Jerry was standing in front of Shaquille O'Neal, the man who could change his life in ways he couldn't yet understand. And despite the uncertainty, Jerry felt something else creeping in, curiosity. Maybe, just maybe, this could be the opportunity he had been waiting for, the fresh start he desperately needed. But how was he supposed to make sense of all of this? Shaq's words echoed in his mind as he tried to regain his bearings. This place has potential. It just needs the right leadership. Jerry had to admit, the thought of turning things around was appealing. Maybe Shaq was right. Maybe it wasn't too late for the dealership to thrive. Maybe, just maybe, this was the break he had been waiting for. All right, Jerry said, after a long pause. I'll stay. But I'll need to think about all this. It's a lot to take in. Shaq nodded, his expression serious but still warm. I understand. Just know that the offer stands. I want you on my team, Jerry. And I think you'll find that things are going to be different around here. A lot different. Jerry nodded, feeling the weight of the decision settling in. He wasn't sure what the future held, but one thing was clear, his life was about to change in ways he couldn't yet comprehend. And all it had taken was one unexpected encounter with Shaquille O'Neal. The rest of the afternoon passed in a haze for Jerry. His mind was overloaded with thoughts about the meeting with Shaq, the sudden shock of discovering who the man really was, and the implications of everything that had just happened. He walked through the dealership like a ghost, going through the motions of answering calls, checking emails, and making sure things were running smoothly. But the truth was, his thoughts were elsewhere, constantly drifting back to the idea that Shaquille O'Neal was about to buy the dealership, and that Jerry's job, his future, and everything he knew were on the verge of a major upheaval. As the workday finally wound down and the dealership started to empty out, Jerry sat back in his office, his mind racing. The phone calls were fewer, and the showroom was quieter now, a stark contrast to the chaotic bustle earlier in the day. He leaned back in his chair and stared at the ceiling, trying to make sense of the events that had unfolded. How had this happened? Shaquille O'Neal wasn't just another rich celebrity with too much time on his hands. He was someone who had built an empire outside of basketball, entrepreneur, philanthropist, businessman. The more Jerry thought about it, the more he realized how serious this was. If Shaq was indeed buying the dealership, it wasn't just about car sales or the daily grind anymore. This was an opportunity that could change everything, not just for Jerry, but for the entire team. But there was something that kept nagging at him, the uncertainty. He didn't know if he was ready for such a drastic shift. What if he wasn't cut out for working under a high-profile figure like Shaq? What if he failed to meet the new expectations? Get it together, Jerry, he muttered to himself, standing up and pacing across his small office. This could be the break you've been waiting for. His phone buzzed, snapping him out of his reverie. It was a text message from Mark, his brother. The message was short and to the point, "Mom and Dad want you to come over for dinner tonight. They've been asking about you." Jerry groaned and ran a hand through his hair. His parents. They were always concerned about him, especially since they knew how unhappy he'd been with his job lately. They would likely ask him what was going on, why he hadn't moved up in the company, and why he didn't seem excited about anything anymore. And the worst part? He had no answers for them. He had no idea what he was doing with his life. That had become painfully clear. But now, after the whirlwind of the day, Jerry wasn't sure what to say. How could he explain that the dealership he had worked at for over a decade was about to be bought by Shaquille O'Neal? How could he explain that his career could be on the verge of a dramatic shift? "I'll be there," he texted back, before slipping his phone into his pocket. Dinner with the family. It felt like the right time. He needed to talk to someone, and his parents were always a safe place to land, no matter how awkward the conversation might be. As he sat down at the dinner table later that evening, Jerry couldn't shake the feeling that his world had shifted beneath him. His parents, as always, greeted him with warm smiles and eager questions. They wanted to know how things were going at work, if he had made any progress, if he was finally happy. It wasn't that they didn't understand, his parents had always been supportive, but they didn't truly know how far removed he had become from the passion he once had for his job. "So, how's everything going at the dealership?" his mom asked, passing him a plate of mashed potatoes. "Any big changes?" Jerry hesitated for a moment, wondering how to even begin. What could he say? That his dealership was about to be bought by one of the most famous basketball players in the world. That his life was about to take a turn he never expected. "Well, something big did happen today," Jerry said, finally deciding to share. A potential buyer came in, Shaquille O'Neal. The basketball player. His parents froze for a second, their forks pausing midair. "Wait, Shaquille O'Neal?" his dad asked, incredulous. "Yeah, that's Shaq," Jerry said with a nervous chuckle. "Turns out he's been looking into buying dealerships, and he wants to buy ours." His parents exchanged a glance. His mother raised an eyebrow. "So, what does that mean for you?" "That's the thing," Jerry said, leaning forward in his chair. "He wants me to stay on as manager. He wants to change things around, to bring in new leadership. But, honestly, I'm not sure what to think. This could be a huge opportunity, but I'm also a little freaked out. What if I can't live up to his expectations?" His dad, who had always been the calm one in the family, put his fork down and gave Jerry a thoughtful look. "You've been at that dealership for a long time, Jerry. You know the ins and outs. If anyone can make it work, it's you. But don't let fear hold you back. It sounds like an opportunity you can't pass up." Jerry was taken aback by his dad's confidence. He had always been the one to give the practical advice, the steady guidance. But tonight, there was something different in his tone. His dad had always been a hard worker, and he had taught Jerry the value of putting in the effort, even when things were tough. Maybe this was the push Jerry needed to see things in a new light. "Maybe you're right," Jerry said, though he still wasn't entirely convinced. "But what if I mess it up?" His mom smiled, a soft, encouraging look on her face. "Jerry, you've got this. If you don't take chances, you'll never know what you're capable of. This could be the fresh start you need." Jerry didn't say anything for a moment, his mind racing as he processed his mother's words. Fresh start. The idea was tempting. It had been so long since he'd felt excited about anything at the dealership, and now, for the first time in a while, there was a glimmer of something. Maybe it wasn't too late for him to turn things around. He stared down at his plate, lost in thought, until his brother Mark broke the silence. "Well, this is wild," Mark said, grinning at Jerry. "You're about to work for Shaquille O'Neal. That's crazy. I hope you're not just going to sell him some cars and let him take over. You've got to show him what you're really made of." Jerry chuckled, grateful for the support, even if it came with a touch of humor. "I don't know. It's definitely going to be an adjustment, but maybe I'm ready for it." As the evening wore on and they continued to talk, Jerry felt a sense of clarity starting to form. He still wasn't sure exactly what the future held, but he knew one thing for certain: this could be the turning point he had been waiting for. The opportunity to make a real change, to prove that he still had what it took to succeed. Maybe it was time for Jerry to take that leap of faith, to take control of his own future, and let go of the fear that had been holding him back for so long. And just maybe, Shaquille O'Neal, the man who had once been a giant on the basketball court, would be the one to help him find his way back to the top. But only time would tell. The next morning, Jerry woke up with a nervous energy that kept him tossing and turning all night. He'd barely slept, the whirlwind of emotions and thoughts about his meeting with Shaquille O'Neal still swirling in his mind. He had never imagined that something so dramatic could happen in his career. He'd always pictured a slow, steady rise through the ranks, not a sudden leap into something so big, so unknown. When Jerry arrived at the dealership, it was like walking into a different world. The usual hum of the showroom, the chatter of salespeople, and the routine calls from customers, all of it seemed distant now, replaced by a quiet anticipation that hung in the air. Today was the day Shaq was supposed to come by and discuss the future of the dealership. The whole staff seemed on edge, as if they were waiting for a moment of truth that would shape their careers forever. "Morning, Jerry." Mark, one of the sales associates, greeted him as he passed by. "Hey, Mark," Jerry said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Ready for the big meeting?" Mark shrugged, trying to hide his nerves with a nonchalant smile. "As ready as I'll ever be. I mean, who wouldn't be excited about working for Shaq?" Jerry couldn't help but laugh, though his laughter was more out of nervousness than humor. "Yeah, I guess. But you know, it's more than just working for him. We have no idea what he's planning for the place. It could change everything." Mark gave him a thoughtful look. "True, but that's not always a bad thing. Sometimes, change can be a good thing." Jerry nodded absently, his mind still racing. He made his way to his office and sat down behind his desk, taking a deep breath. Today was a pivotal moment in his life, and he wasn't sure whether to feel excited or terrified. Could he really pull this off? Could he be the manager Shaquille O'Neal needed to turn the dealership around? And more importantly, could he prove to himself that he still had what it took to succeed? As if on cue, Jerry's phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Shaq. "See you at 10. I want to talk vision. Be ready." The message was direct, and that was exactly how Jerry expected Shaq to be. He didn't have time for small talk, he was here to make a big impact, and Jerry had to be ready to play his part in it. At 10 a.m., the moment finally arrived. Jerry walked into the showroom, where Shaq was already waiting, his imposing figure a presence even in the spacious dealership. Despite the casual clothes he was wearing, jeans, a t-shirt, and a baseball cap, Shaq exuded an air of authority that left no doubt in Jerry's mind that this was a man who commanded attention. Shaq greeted Jerry with a smile, extending his hand for a firm shake. "Good to see you, Jerry. Ready to get down to business?" Jerry forced a smile, trying to keep his cool. "Yeah, ready as I'll ever be." "Great," Shaq said, motioning for Jerry to follow him as they walked through the showroom. "First off, let me say this. I'm not here to just throw money at a business and call it a day. I'm here because I see something in this place. The foundation is solid, but it needs some love. A little bit of my magic." Jerry tried not to look surprised. Shaq's words were confident, almost swaggering, and yet they carried a sense of purpose. Jerry had always thought of Shaquille O'Neal as larger than life, an athlete with a personality as big as his career. But now, standing next to him in the dealership, Jerry could feel that Shaq wasn't just a basketball player turned businessman. He was a force. "I like the sound of that," Jerry said, following Shaq through the dealership. "But what exactly do you mean by the magic?" Shaq grinned. "It's about more than just selling cars. It's about creating an experience. People don't just want a car, they want to feel something when they buy it. They want to feel like they're making a smart decision, that they're part of something bigger than just a transaction." Jerry nodded, understanding what Shaq was getting at. "I get it. You want to build a brand, not just a dealership. Shaq pointed at him, smiling. Exactly. We're going to create an atmosphere where customers feel like they're part of a family, not just a sale. We'll use the latest technology, improve our customer service, and make this place stand out from the rest. But, Jerry, I need you to lead the charge. I need someone who understands this business inside and out, who can take the vision and make it happen. Jerry's heart raced as Shaq's words sank in. This was the moment. This was his chance to prove himself, to take everything he had learned over the years and use it to build something incredible. But it wasn't going to be easy. Shaq's expectations were high. He wasn't just looking for someone to sit behind a desk and sign papers. He wanted a leader, someone who could bring the team together and execute a vision. I'm ready, Jerry said, his voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside him. I won't let you down. Shaq gave him a thoughtful look, as if sizing him up. I know you won't, Jerry. That's why I'm counting on you. For the rest of the morning, Jerry and Shaq went over plans for the dealership's future. Shaq had big ideas, introducing new marketing strategies, improving the customer experience, revamping the inventory system, and even creating a community outreach program. He had the energy and enthusiasm that Jerry had been missing for so long. It was like a breath of fresh air, and as the hours passed, Jerry began to feel a spark of excitement ignite within him. By the time they wrapped up the meeting, Shaq had laid out his expectations clearly, and Jerry understood the weight of the responsibility he now carried. But he also understood something else. This wasn't just about managing a dealership anymore. This was about leading a transformation, both for the business and for himself. Shaq clapped Jerry on the back as they stood by the door, preparing to part ways for the day. You've got a lot of work ahead of you, but I have faith in you, Jerry. This place is going to change, and so will you. Jerry watched as Shaq walked out of the dealership, his mind racing. The enormity of the task ahead still felt overwhelming, but one thing was clear, he was no longer just a manager at a struggling dealership. He was about to be part of something bigger, something that could change his life forever. As Jerry stood there, staring at the showroom, a sense of determination washed over him. This was his shot, his opportunity to rise above the routine, to prove that he was capable of far more than he ever thought possible. The question was no longer if he could do it, but how, and he was ready to find out. The next few days felt like a blur to Jerry. The dealership was abuzz with speculation, whispers of the changes Shaquille O'Neal had promised, and the team trying to get a sense of what their futures would look like under the new ownership. Jerry found himself caught in the middle, eager to make a good impression but overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the transformation Shaq was envisioning. In the first meeting with the entire staff, Shaq was clear about his intentions. He wasn't here to just make the dealership profitable, he was here to revolutionize it. Shaquille O'Neal wasn't some investor who wanted to sit back and collect a check. He was hands-on, passionate, and full of energy. That energy seemed to be contagious, as it spread across the room and sparked a sense of anticipation among the staff. But for Jerry, it was a bit like staring at a mountain and wondering if he was capable of climbing it. Shaq stood at the front of the room, his commanding presence filling every corner of the showroom. His enthusiasm was palpable, and even though Jerry had seen the man on TV countless times, he couldn't help but feel intimidated by Shaq's larger-than-life personality. All right, listen up. Shaq's deep voice resonated, bringing the room to attention. This dealership isn't just a place to buy cars, it's a place to change lives. We're going to treat our customers like family, make them feel valued, and give them an experience they'll never forget. We're going to be the best, and we're going to have fun doing it. Jerry found himself nodding along. It wasn't just about selling cars anymore. This was about creating something bigger, a place people would want to come to, not just to buy a car, but to be part of something exciting and innovative. Shaq continued, laying out his vision for the dealership, a new marketing campaign, partnerships with local charities, and even a community outreach program where they would host events, offering free car maintenance clinics and financial literacy classes. He wanted to connect with the local community in a way that no other dealership had before. Jerry's role was clear: he would be at the helm of all this, making sure the plans went from paper to reality. And it was a lot. A lot more than he had ever been responsible for in his career. The pressure was mounting, and Jerry could feel the weight of it on his shoulders. Later that afternoon, Jerry sat in his office, staring at the whiteboard covered in new ideas and action plans. There was so much to do, so many changes to implement, and so little time to make it happen. He had always been good at managing people and operations, but this was different. Shaq's expectations were sky high, and Jerry felt the need to rise to meet them. His phone buzzed again. Shaq was calling. "Hey, Jerry," Shaq's voice boomed over the line. "How's everything going?" "Good, just a little overwhelming, to be honest," Jerry admitted. "There's a lot to take in, a lot of moving pieces." Shaq chuckled. "I hear you. But don't worry. You've got this. I know this is big, but that's why I hired you. I want someone who knows the ins and outs of this place. We'll figure it out together. But first things first, you need to get your team on board. Get them excited. They'll follow your lead, Jerry." Jerry took a deep breath, nodding even though Shaq couldn't see it. "I'll make it happen. I won't let you down." "Good," Shaq said, his voice becoming more serious. "You've got the talent, Jerry. Don't let the pressure get to you. Keep your head in the game." As Jerry hung up, he felt a mixture of determination and fear swirling inside him. Shaq's faith in him was both comforting and terrifying. It was clear that he had the potential to make a huge impact, but the question was whether or not he could rise to the challenge. The following week was a whirlwind of meetings, training sessions, and brainstorming. Shaq had brought in a team of consultants, marketing experts, branding specialists, and customer experience gurus, to help rebrand the dealership. They worked side by side with Jerry and the staff, creating new systems, training everyone on how to deliver the kind of experience Shaq envisioned. It was exhausting, but Jerry couldn't deny that there was a spark of something exciting in the air. The dealership had been stagnant for too long, and now, it was changing. Fast. Jerry began to see the pieces come together. He was learning, growing, and pushing himself beyond what he had thought possible. But there were moments, quiet, fleeting moments, when the weight of the transformation seemed too much to bear. What if he failed? What if the team didn't buy into the changes, or worse, what if Shaq's vision didn't work? Despite these doubts, Jerry kept pushing forward. He'd seen what Shaq was capable of, and he knew that if he could just harness a fraction of that energy and vision, he could turn this place around. He had no choice now. It was sink or swim. One day, as Jerry walked through the showroom, he saw a familiar face, Tom, one of the veteran salespeople who had been with the dealership almost as long as Jerry. Tom was standing by a car, looking a little lost. Jerry walked over to him, sensing that something was off. "Hey, Tom. Everything all right?" Tom looked up, his face filled with uncertainty. "I don't know, Jerry. I've been in this business a long time, and all this change, it's a lot. I'm not sure if I'm cut out for it anymore." Jerry paused, unsure of how to respond. He knew that change could be difficult, especially for someone who had been in the business for so long. But he also knew that if the dealership was going to succeed, they needed everyone to be on board. "I get it," Jerry said softly. "This isn't easy. But it's an opportunity, Tom. You've seen how things have been here for years. It's not going to stay the same. But if we embrace this change, we could be part of something big. Something different. You've got experience, Tom. That's valuable." Tom gave him a long look, his brow furrowed. "I don't know if I can do it, Jerry." Jerry placed a hand on Tom's shoulder, offering a reassuring smile. "You can. I'm here to help, and so is Shaq. We're all in this together." Let's make this place something we can all be proud of. Tom hesitated, then nodded slowly. All right, Jerry. I'll give it a shot. Jerry walked away, a sense of pride swelling in his chest. He was starting to see it, starting to see the team coming together, starting to believe in the vision that Shaq had laid out. It wasn't going to be easy, but it was going to be worth it. And with every challenge, Jerry felt himself rising to meet it. As the weeks passed, Jerry found himself getting more immersed in the chaos of transformation. The dealership was buzzing with activity, new marketing campaigns, revamped processes, and customer service training sessions that seemed endless. Every department was in flux, but at least it was moving in a new direction. There were still plenty of challenges ahead, but Jerry was beginning to feel the first real signs of change. Shaq's influence was everywhere. The showroom was brighter, with larger-than-life posters of Shaquille himself, showcasing the dealership's mission: more than a car, it's a life experience. There were events planned every month, ranging from local charity drives to celebrity car auctions. People were beginning to take notice. And even though Jerry knew they were still in the early stages, he could feel that something was shifting. But there were still moments that made him question whether or not he was cut out for the role. On one particular morning, just as Jerry was getting into his rhythm, a small crisis hit. It started with a call from one of the service department managers. "Jerry, we've got a problem with a customer. One of the new luxury cars we sold is having major issues. The engine light came on less than a week after delivery. The customer's really upset. Wants a full refund, or they're going to leave a bad review." Jerry's stomach dropped. Handling customer complaints was a part of the job he'd grown accustomed to, but with Shaq's name now attached to the dealership, the stakes felt higher. The customer wasn't just upset, they were furious, and Jerry knew that any mishandling could harm the reputation they had worked so hard to rebuild. "I'll handle it," Jerry said, his voice steady, even though his heart was pounding. "Give me the details. I'll talk to the customer." As soon as he hung up, Jerry took a deep breath. He knew he had to act fast. A disgruntled customer could spell disaster for the dealership, especially with the public eye now focused on them. With a sense of urgency, he headed toward the service bay to meet with the customer in person. When Jerry arrived, the customer, a middle-aged man dressed in a sharp suit, was pacing in front of his car, arms crossed, clearly fuming. His face softened slightly when he saw Jerry approach, but the anger still burned in his eyes. "I've had it," the man snapped. "I don't care about the new management or the Shaquille O'Neal experience. I just want a car that works, and this one's a lemon. I demand a full refund, or I'll make sure everyone knows about it." Jerry stepped forward, keeping his tone calm and respectful. "I understand your frustration, sir. Let me start by saying that we take full responsibility for this. It's not the kind of service we expect to provide, and I'm here to make sure we fix it." The customer's eyes narrowed. "Well, I'm glad someone's taking responsibility. But that doesn't fix my car, does it?" Jerry nodded. "It's going to be fixed. We'll get the issue resolved, and I'll make sure you're taken care of. I'll even personally oversee the process to make sure it's done right. And in the meantime, I'm going to have one of our team members offer you a loaner car, free of charge, so you're not without a ride while we work on yours." The customer seemed taken aback by the offer but wasn't ready to let his guard down completely. "And what about a refund? I've had my car for less than a week. Shouldn't I get my money back?" Jerry thought for a moment. Shaq had taught him to think beyond the transaction. This wasn't just about fixing a car, it was about restoring trust and loyalty. If they didn't act quickly and decisively, they could lose this customer for good. "I'm happy to work with you on this," Jerry said. "We'll take care of the repairs, and if for any reason you're still not satisfied after that, we can discuss options. But my main priority right now is to make sure you leave here happy, knowing you're being treated with the respect you deserve." The customer paused, eyes searching Jerry's face. Then, Slowly, his arms uncrossed, and he exhaled a heavy sigh. "All right. I'll give you a chance. But if this isn't fixed, we'll be having a very different conversation." Jerry nodded. "I'll make sure it's done right. You have my word." As the customer handed over his keys and was escorted to a loaner car, Jerry felt a weight lift from his chest. The situation hadn't been easy, but he had managed to navigate it without the dealership's reputation taking a hit. It wasn't a huge victory, but it was a sign that he was getting the hang of this new role. Later that afternoon, Jerry found himself at his desk, reflecting on the encounter. He'd always known how to handle customer complaints, but the difference now was the sense of ownership. This wasn't just about salvaging a sale, it was about building a long-term relationship with the customer, about showing them that the dealership truly cared about their experience. It wasn't just Shaq's name on the line, it was Jerry's too. That evening, as he was about to head home, his phone buzzed again. It was a text from Shaq. "How's everything going with the new changes?" Jerry quickly typed back, "We're getting there, Shaq. There's still a lot to work through, but we're on track." A moment later, Shaq's reply came, "Good. I know it's a lot. But you're doing great. Keep pushing, Jerry. The team's behind you." Jerry couldn't help but feel a surge of confidence as he read the message. Shaq had a way of making him feel like he was capable of more than he realized. He wasn't just a manager at a car dealership anymore, he was part of something bigger, something that was about to change the game. And for the first time in a long time, Jerry believed he could handle whatever came his way. He glanced out the window, seeing the lights of the dealership glowing in the distance. It was late, but he knew there was more work to do. The transformation was just beginning, and Jerry was determined to be the one leading it every step of the way. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but Jerry was no longer afraid of them. He was ready. And with Shaq's vision pushing him forward, he knew there was no limit to what they could achieve. The next few weeks passed by in a whirlwind of activity. The dealership had been going through a rapid transformation, and Jerry was at the center of it all. Each morning brought new challenges, whether it was tackling an upset customer, overseeing the new training programs, or making sure the marketing campaigns were running smoothly. But despite the growing workload, Jerry had a new sense of purpose. For the first time in a long while, he felt like he was part of something bigger, something that could make a real impact. But not everyone was convinced. Despite Shaq's bigger-than-life presence and his optimism, there was still resistance. Not every employee was on board with the changes, and the whispers were growing louder. There were murmurs of frustration in the break room, of employees who felt the changes were too sudden, too much, too fast. Jerry knew he had to address this tension before it threatened to undermine everything. It all came to a head one Thursday morning, when Jerry found himself facing a problem that was as old as the dealership itself, a rift between the veteran employees and the new hires. It started with a meeting between the sales team. Jerry had gathered everyone to go over the new sales targets and discuss upcoming events, but as he spoke, he noticed that several of the senior salespeople looked uneasy. They exchanged glances, some arms folded, others looking down at their phones rather than paying attention. After the meeting, Jerry was approached by Chris, a longtime sales associate who had been with the dealership for nearly 15 years. Chris was known for being outspoken, and it didn't take long for him to make his feelings known. "Jerry, we need to talk," Chris said, his tone sharp. "This whole thing, it's just not working. We've been selling cars the same way for years. Now you want us to switch everything up because of some celebrity owner. People like Shaquille O'Neal don't know anything about running a dealership, and we're the ones left picking up the pieces." Jerry took a deep breath, trying to keep his emotions in check. It wasn't the first time he'd heard these concerns, but it stung more now that Chris was the one speaking up. Chris had been with the dealership through thick and thin, and Jerry respected him for his years of service. But that didn't mean Jerry was going to back down. "I get it, Chris," Jerry said calmly, "but we're not just changing for the sake of change. We're adapting. The car business isn't what it used to be. Customers want more than just a sale, they want an experience. And that's exactly what Shaq's vision is all about. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but it's the future of this dealership. Chris scoffed. The future? Or is it just some flashy gimmick to make us all dance to the tune of a basketball star? I've been doing this for years. I know how to sell cars. I don't need a show to do my job. Jerry felt the tension rising. He knew that Chris's frustration wasn't just about the changes, it was about fear. Fear of losing his status, fear of being left behind. And deep down, Jerry understood. Change was scary, especially when it felt like everything you'd worked for was being turned upside down. Look, Jerry said, his voice softening, I'm not asking you to give up your experience or the way you've been doing things. I'm asking you to trust the process. This isn't about replacing what's worked. It's about adding something new, something that will help us grow. And we're all in this together. Chris stared at Jerry for a long moment, clearly weighing his options. Finally, he spoke again, his tone less combative but still filled with doubt. I don't know, Jerry. I've been doing this long enough to know when things aren't going to work. I'll give it a shot, but I'm not promising anything. Jerry nodded, understanding. I appreciate that, Chris. Just remember, this is about more than just us. It's about the future of this place, and about our customers. As Chris walked away, Jerry couldn't help but feel a mix of relief and frustration. He knew it wouldn't be easy to win over everyone, especially the veterans who had been set in their ways for so long. But if they didn't embrace the changes, they would risk being left behind. He had to make them see that this was the only way forward. Later that week, Jerry sat down with Shaq to discuss the growing resistance among the team. Shaq had been in the business long enough to know that change wasn't always met with open arms, but he also knew that the right leadership could turn things around. So, what's the deal with Chris? Shaq asked, his voice calm but curious. I heard there's some pushback from the team. How's the morale? Jerry sighed. It's tough, Shaq. The older guys like Chris, they're struggling with the changes. They've been doing things a certain way for so long, and now they feel like we're throwing it all out the window. They're afraid the new direction is just a fad. Shaq leaned back in his chair, his massive frame making the chair seem small. I get it. They're comfortable in their routine. But comfort doesn't bring growth. Change does. I know you've got a tough job ahead, but you've got to get them on board. They'll follow your lead, Jerry. But you've got to show them why this is worth it. Jerry nodded, feeling the weight of Shaq's words. He wasn't wrong. If the dealership was going to succeed, he had to convince everyone that the changes weren't just for Shaq, they were for everyone. But the question was how. How could he break through the resistance and get the team to see the bigger picture? The following days were filled with difficult conversations. Jerry had one-on-one talks with each of the senior salespeople, trying to address their concerns and ease their fears. He wasn't trying to force them into compliance, he was trying to show them that they had a choice, to adapt and thrive, or to resist and risk being left behind. And slowly, little by little, Jerry started to see progress. Chris, who had been the most vocal in his opposition, was the first to come around. It wasn't easy, but as Jerry continued to work with him, Chris began to see the potential of Shaq's vision. The promise of new customers, better marketing, and an elevated reputation slowly started to outweigh the fear of the unknown. By the end of the week, Jerry could feel the atmosphere in the dealership shift. The resistance hadn't vanished, but the team was beginning to understand that the changes weren't just a trend, they were a chance to be part of something big. Shaq's influence was working, and Jerry was finally beginning to see the transformation take hold. The loyalty of the team was still being tested, but for the first time since Shaq had taken over, Jerry felt like they were moving forward, together. There was still a long road ahead, but Jerry was ready to face it with the team by his side. And if he could get them all on the same page, there was no limit to what they could achieve. The success of Jerry's efforts was beginning to show. Sales numbers were creeping upward, customer satisfaction was higher, and the dealership's new identity under Shaq's ownership was slowly gaining traction. However, there was a creeping undercurrent of tension that still hadn't dissipated. While things were improving on the surface, there were still doubts bubbling beneath the surface, especially when it came to Shaq's approach. Jerry had witnessed firsthand how some people were still clinging to the old ways, unwilling to embrace Shaq's larger-than-life ideas. And while most employees were beginning to accept that the changes were here to stay, others were resistant, stuck in their ways, unwilling to adapt. It was a stark reminder that, as much as people liked to talk about progress, true change was a messy, complicated beast. One such example of this conflict came in the form of a department head who had been with the dealership for years, Mike. He was the head of the service department and had seen the dealership through both good and bad times. Mike was one of the few employees who hadn't warmed to the idea of Shaq's vision, and Jerry knew it was only a matter of time before Mike's discontent became a problem. It happened one afternoon when Jerry was walking through the service bays, checking in with the crew. The hum of conversation and the sound of tools in motion filled the air as the technicians worked on the various vehicles. Everything seemed normal until Jerry approached Mike, who was standing by his office, arms crossed, his usual stoic expression fixed on his face. "Hey Mike," Jerry greeted, his voice casual. "How's everything going today?" Mike glanced up, his expression unreadable. "It's going. But you might want to sit down for this one, Jerry." Jerry raised an eyebrow but followed Mike into his office. Once inside, Mike shut the door behind them, casting a glance at the service schedule board on the wall, before turning his attention back to Jerry. "We've got a problem, and it's been growing for a while," Mike began, his voice low. "The crew's not happy with the direction things are going." Jerry's stomach churned. He had suspected this was coming, but hearing it confirmed from Mike, someone who had always been level-headed, made it all the more real. "What do you mean?" Jerry asked carefully, leaning against the desk. "Are we talking about the new processes? The car models? The marketing stuff?" Mike sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "It's not just that. It's the whole damn thing. The way we're supposed to handle customers, the flashy nonsense with Shaq, the events, the experience. We're a car dealership, Jerry, not a circus. This isn't what we signed up for." Jerry could feel the weight of the conversation pressing down on him. "Look, Mike, I get it. I know it's a big change. But we're trying to build something new here. Something that's going to work in the long run. We can't stay stuck in the past." Mike's face darkened. "And that's the problem, Jerry. You've bought into it. You're pushing us all into this Shaq experience that has nothing to do with selling cars. The old ways worked. Sure, things have changed, but not every problem can be solved with a bigger marketing budget and a celebrity endorsement. We're losing sight of what really matters." Jerry felt his patience waning. Mike had been a loyal employee for years, but now he was questioning everything that Jerry had worked so hard to implement. "Mike, this isn't just about Shaq. It's about taking the dealership to a place where we can compete. We can't just keep doing the same thing and expect different results. This isn't about Shaq's fame, it's about building something real that connects with customers." Mike shook his head, clearly growing frustrated. "But that's just it. You're so focused on the show, the spectacle, that you're forgetting the basics. People come to us for a car, not a sideshow. If we keep pushing this gimmick, we'll lose the real heart of what we do." There was a tense silence between them, and Jerry knew that Mike wasn't wrong. The concerns were valid. Sometimes, it felt like the dealership's identity was being drowned out by all the flashiness, and that made him uneasy. But the bigger picture, the vision Shaq had for the dealership, was still something Jerry believed in. It wasn't just about cars anymore, it was about creating a space that felt alive, unique, and different. "Mike," Jerry finally said, choosing his words carefully, "I get that you're worried. But you can't pretend that what we were doing before was enough. It's not working. Not anymore. People want an experience, and that's what we're trying to create. A place where they don't just buy a car, they buy into something bigger. And if that means embracing the change, then we have to do it." Mike's gaze softened, but his stance didn't change. "I get what you're saying, Jerry. I do. But I don't think it's going to work. You're setting us up for failure, and I'm not sure I want to be a part of it." Jerry's heart sank. It was one thing for a few people to be skeptical, but for Mike to voice such a strong opinion, someone who had been such a steady force for the dealership, was different. It was clear that Mike wasn't the only one feeling this way. The team's loyalty was being tested, and right now, it was standing at a crossroads. "I don't want you to leave, Mike," Jerry said, his voice sincere. "But I need you to trust me on this. We're making changes, yes, but we're not abandoning our values. I need you on board. I need the team to be united. Otherwise, we're going to lose everything." Mike hesitated. "I don't know, Jerry. I've been here too long to just follow the crowd. I need to see real results before I buy into any of this." Jerry nodded. "I understand. But give me some time. Give us some time. If we fail, I'll be the first to admit it. But I'm telling you, we can't go back. This is the future." Mike stood silently for a moment, considering Jerry's words. Then, finally, he spoke. "I'll think about it. But don't expect me to just fall in line like the rest." Jerry let out a quiet sigh of relief. It wasn't the answer he'd hoped for, but it was something. Mike wasn't completely on board yet, but at least there was room for discussion. And right now, that was enough. As Jerry walked out of Mike's office, he couldn't shake the feeling that the dealership's transformation was teetering on the edge of something fragile. They had made strides, but the real test was just beginning. Could they pull it off? Could they truly change the culture of the dealership without alienating those who had been with them through thick and thin? Only time would tell. And as Jerry looked around at the busy service bays, he knew one thing for sure: no matter what, he was going to fight for the future of this dealership. Because if they were going to succeed, it had to be all or nothing. The next few weeks passed in a tense atmosphere. Jerry had hoped that the conversations with Mike and the other staff would lead to unity, but the cracks in the foundation of the dealership's transformation were growing more visible. Despite the growing pains, Jerry was determined to push forward. He wasn't just trying to build a business, he was trying to build a legacy for Shaq, for himself, and for everyone who worked at the dealership. But as much as Jerry tried to focus on the bigger picture, he couldn't ignore the fact that Mike's doubts were starting to spread. It wasn't just Mike anymore, more and more employees were starting to voice their concerns. There were side conversations in the break room, whispers in the hallways, and a general sense that the tide was shifting. People were starting to question if Shaq's grand vision for the dealership was truly sustainable, or if it was just another passing trend. The turning point came when Jerry received an anonymous letter in his inbox one morning. He opened it cautiously, his heart sinking as he read the words. "Jerry. We've been with this dealership for years, and we've seen how things have changed. But this new direction is a mistake. Shaq doesn't know what he's doing. We've tried to adapt, but things are only getting worse. It's time for us to stand up for what we believe in before it's too late. The old way worked, and you know it." Jerry stared at the letter, his fingers trembling as he set it down on his desk. It was a punch to the gut. This wasn't just one person, this was a collective sentiment. It was the quiet uprising he'd been dreading. He needed to address this, and fast. That afternoon, Jerry called an all-staff meeting. The room was packed with employees, the tension thick in the air. Everyone knew something was coming, everyone had heard the whispers. Jerry stood at the front of the room, his heart pounding in his chest. This was it. This was his moment to either turn things around or watch everything fall apart. Shaq was there, as he had been during most meetings. His towering presence was a reminder that this wasn't just any dealership, it was a dealership with ambition, with big dreams, and with the backing of someone who was larger than life. But even Shaq couldn't make up for the growing discontent in the room. Jerry cleared his throat. "All right, everyone. I know things have been difficult. I know that change is hard. We've been pushing forward with a vision, but I've heard your concerns. I've heard that some of you feel that we're losing sight of what made this place great in the first place. I get it. And I want to address that head on." The room grew quieter, and Jerry could feel the weight of every eye on him. He continued. "We're not abandoning the foundation of this dealership. We're not throwing away what's worked for us. But if we keep doing things the way we always have, we're going to be left behind. I want to make sure that every single one of you understands this. We're here to build something that lasts. We're here to make sure that the next generation of customers walks through these doors and sees a place that stands for quality, service, and, yes, a unique experience. It's about moving forward, not standing still." A murmur ran through the room, but Jerry wasn't done. "I know some of you have doubts, and I want you to know that I respect that. Change is never easy. But I also want you to understand that this change is not just about Shaq being a celebrity owner. It's about making this place the best it can be, for all of us. We can't afford to be afraid of change anymore." There was a long pause before Chris, the senior sales associate, spoke up. "I get that, Jerry. But what we're doing here, it doesn't feel like we're keeping the old ways. We've been selling cars for years without all this spectacle. We've done fine, and now it feels like you're trying to turn us into something we're not." Jerry locked eyes with Chris, feeling a mixture of frustration and understanding. "Chris, I know you're passionate about what you do. And I'm not asking you to forget that. But if we want to stay relevant, we have to adapt. We can't keep doing business the same way when the world is changing around us. People want more than just a car, they want an experience. And if we don't give it to them, someone else will." Shaq stepped forward at that point, his deep voice booming in the room. "Look, I know I'm not a car guy, but I know what it means to work hard and to build something great. Jerry and I are in this together, and we're not backing down. We're doing this because we believe in it. And we believe in you. But if we're going to succeed, we need all of you on board." There was a heavy silence, and Jerry could see that some of the faces in the room were softening. But there was still a divide. The tension hadn't disappeared, and it wasn't going to disappear overnight. Just as Jerry thought the room might relax, Mike's voice rang out from the back. "This isn't about us working together. This is about us being pushed into something we didn't agree to. You're asking us to change everything about how we operate without giving us a real reason to believe it will work. We've seen the changes in sales, sure, but the numbers don't tell the whole story. What about the morale? What about the people who've been here for years, busting their backs to make this place run?" Jerry took a deep breath, steadying himself. This was it, the tipping point. He couldn't let Mike's words divide the room. He had to answer, to make them see that this wasn't just about selling more cars, it was about making a future for everyone. "I'm not asking you to follow blindly, Mike. But I'm asking you to trust me. Trust that we're doing this because we believe it will make us stronger. And if we can't move forward together, we'll be left behind. We can't go back to the way things were. Not now. Not ever." There was a heavy silence, the room divided, unsure of what would happen next. It felt like the dealership was on the edge of a precipice, and the future was uncertain. Jerry could feel the weight of the responsibility on his shoulders, and for the first time in a long while, he wasn't sure if they could make it. But deep down, he knew one thing, he wasn't giving up. And neither would Shaq. They would keep pushing forward, no matter the cost. This battle was far from over. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The following days were some of the most difficult Jerry had experienced at the dealership. While some of the employees had softened after the meeting, others remained resolutely against the changes, convinced that the dealership was headed in the wrong direction. Mike's words still echoed in Jerry's mind. Was he losing sight of what truly mattered? Were they pushing too hard, too fast? Jerry spent his nights reviewing every decision made, every change implemented, trying to discern if there was any part of the transformation that needed to be reassessed. Could they still save the dealership's heart, the part that had once made it successful, without sacrificing the bold vision that Shaq had set out for them? Then, as if on cue, the dealership was hit with a crisis that would test everything Jerry had fought for. It was a Thursday afternoon when Jerry received the call that would change the course of everything. The dealership's social media accounts had exploded with negative comments. A video had gone viral. A customer, angry over a sales experience, had filmed a rant about the circus atmosphere at the dealership. The video was far from flattering, painting the dealership as a joke, a far cry from the professionalism Jerry had hoped to foster. The video was filled with comments about Shaq's flashy, over-the-top promotional stunts, the gaudy decor, and the new customer experience tactics. The final blow came when the customer said, "I didn't come here for a concert, I came for a car." That line had stuck in people's minds, spreading like wildfire. Jerry stared at the screen, his stomach sinking. This was bad, really bad. He immediately called Shaq to let him know what was happening. Shaq was quick to respond, his deep voice sounding concerned but determined. "This is exactly what I was worried about, Jerry. A couple of bad experiences and it all blows up. We've got to do something fast." "I'm already on it," Jerry replied, already formulating a plan. "We need to address this publicly, show that we care about customer feedback and that we're committed to improving." The next few hours were a blur of calls, social media management, and public relations. Jerry worked with his marketing team to draft a response, emphasizing that the dealership appreciated the feedback and was committed to fixing the issues. They promised to improve the experience and reach out to the customer in the video directly. But Jerry knew this wouldn't be enough. There was no denying that the video had exposed a crack in the dealership's shiny new image. No matter how they handled the fallout, the damage had already been done. The real test came when Jerry called an emergency staff meeting to address the situation. Everyone gathered in the showroom, the same space where they had once celebrated the start of this bold new journey. But now, the air was thick with uncertainty. Jerry stood in front of the room, his heart pounding. He could see the skeptical faces, the employees who had been questioning the changes for weeks. Mike was there, arms folded, his expression unreadable. He knew that the next few minutes would either push the team together or tear them apart. "I know the last few days have been hard," Jerry began, his voice steady despite the chaos. "And I know that we're facing a crisis right now. The video, that customer's complaint, it's gotten a lot of attention, and it's not flattering. But we can't afford to hide from this. We need to confront it head-on." Mike raised an eyebrow. "Confront it head-on? How do you plan on doing that, Jerry? People are calling us a joke. The dealership's reputation is on the line." Jerry nodded, acknowledging the truth in Mike's words. "I know. I know it's bad. But this is where we make our stand. This is our chance to prove that we're not just about flashy gimmicks. We're about real customer service. We're about making sure every person who walks through that door gets the best experience possible, whether they're buying a car or just browsing." There was a long pause as the room absorbed Jerry's words. Shaq, standing beside Jerry, spoke up, his voice calm but unwavering. "This is a setback, but it's not the end. We've built something big here, but if we're going to make it work, we've got to keep pushing forward. We'll fix this, together. Jerry turned back to the group, meeting each person's gaze. I need all of you to believe in this. We're going to focus on what we've always done well, treating people with respect, giving them a great deal, and making sure they leave happy. The show isn't what's important. The cars, the service, the experience, that's what matters. Slowly, Jerry could see some of the employees begin to soften. The skepticism didn't disappear entirely, but a glimmer of hope returned. They weren't just following a celebrity's dream anymore, they were working together to salvage the business that had been a part of their lives for so long. The next few days were a whirlwind. Jerry worked tirelessly with his team to personally reach out to the disgruntled customer in the video, offering them a full refund and a chance to meet with Shaq himself. The PR team released an official apology, promising that the dealership would focus on delivering an authentic customer experience that balanced excitement with professionalism. But even as Jerry worked to fix the external damage, the internal conflict remained. Mike, still vocal in his opposition, had begun to rally others who shared his views. The dealership's culture was on the line, and Jerry knew that he couldn't afford to lose any more ground. One night, as Jerry sat in his office, staring at the computer screen, he heard a knock at the door. He looked up to see Shaq standing in the doorway, his expression serious. You all right, Jerry? Shaq asked, stepping into the office. Jerry exhaled slowly, rubbing his eyes. Yeah, I don't know, Shaq. I'm trying to fix this, but it feels like everything's falling apart. The team's divided. The customers are upset. I don't know how much longer we can keep this up. Shaq paused for a moment, then sat across from Jerry. I've been where you are, man. Trying to do the impossible, trying to change everything. I get it. But you've got to remember why we're doing this. We're building something big. Something different. And yeah, it's going to take time. It's going to be tough. But you've got to believe in it. You've got to believe in us. Jerry looked up at Shaq, seeing the sincerity in his eyes. He had come to realize something in that moment: this wasn't just about a dealership. It wasn't just about cars, or flashy stunts, or even Shaq's celebrity status. This was about taking a leap of faith, about pushing past the doubts and believing in the future, even when the road was uncertain. I believe in us, Shaq, Jerry said quietly. I just hope it's enough. Shaq smiled, a big grin that somehow felt reassuring. It will be. I've got your back. And you've got mine. Let's get this right. The weight of the conversation hung heavy in the air, but for the first time in a long while, Jerry felt a flicker of hope. They had a long way to go, but with Shaq by his side and the right team behind him, maybe, just maybe, they could turn things around. The line in the sand had been drawn, and there was no turning back. The next few days were a whirlwind of action. Jerry and Shaq knew that the dealership's reputation had taken a significant hit, but they were determined to turn things around. There was no more room for hesitation. They couldn't just talk about change, they had to show it. The first step was rebuilding trust with the customers. Jerry and the team brainstormed ideas for a customer appreciation event, something that would let the public know they were committed to doing better, to proving that the dealership cared about more than just making a sale. The team pulled together to organize a Customer Appreciation Day, where they'd offer free car checkups, special discounts, and give out promotional merchandise with Shaq's branding. But Jerry knew it wasn't enough to rely solely on promotional events. The real test was how the dealership would act from that point forward. This was the moment to show that they weren't just chasing trends, they were setting a new standard for customer service and integrity. Meanwhile, inside the dealership, things weren't much better. The tension among the staff remained palpable, and Mike's influence was starting to spread further. There was a small faction of employees who still weren't convinced by the new direction, and they weren't afraid to make their displeasure known. Jerry had noticed the subtle way some staff members were undermining the changes, especially when it came to the more unconventional aspects of Shaq's vision. Every time they had a sales meeting, it felt like more employees were waiting for Jerry to slip up, to give them a reason to go back to the old way. Jerry understood that they couldn't afford to wait too long for things to shift back to normal, and he knew it would take more than a few events and speeches to get everyone back on the same page. The moment of truth arrived during the Customer Appreciation Day event. The day started with a bright, sunny sky, the kind of perfect weather that was almost too good to be true. Shaq had arrived early, wearing his signature basketball jersey over a sleek jacket, his presence commanding the room as he made his way through the lot. He greeted everyone with his trademark enthusiasm, but Jerry noticed that his usual upbeat attitude seemed more calculated this time. He knew Shaq was feeling the pressure. The dealership was bustling with customers who had come for the special event, some curious about the new direction, others simply hoping for a great deal. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation, but Jerry could feel the subtle undercurrent of skepticism. He had heard the rumors circulating among the crowd. Some of the visitors weren't sure if the changes at the dealership were a gimmick or if they represented a real commitment to customer satisfaction. Jerry moved through the crowd, greeting customers and keeping an eye on his team. But the mood in the dealership shifted when Mike walked over, his face twisted into a frown. "This is a circus," Mike muttered under his breath, barely loud enough for Jerry to hear. Jerry was taken aback, but he kept his cool. "What do you mean?" Mike gestured to the flashy promotional material, the music blasting in the background, and the oversized Shaq cutouts. "It's all just smoke and mirrors. Where's the substance? Where's the real focus on customer service?" Jerry's jaw clenched. He didn't have time for this now, not when things were already teetering on the edge. "Mike, I get it. I know it's a lot, but we're building something here. We're proving that we care. Just trust me on this." Mike shook his head, his face a mask of discontent. "Trust you? That's the problem, Jerry. You're asking us to follow something we don't even understand. All of this. It's just a distraction from the real work." Before Jerry could respond, Shaq stepped in, his large frame appearing between the two. His voice was firm, but calm. "Mike, I hear you. I really do. But what you're missing is that sometimes to build something great, you have to take risks. You have to be bold. You have to make people sit up and take notice. This isn't just about selling cars. It's about changing the game. And that's what we're doing." Mike didn't respond immediately. The silence hung heavy in the air as the crowd milled about in the background. Jerry could tell that Shaq's words had hit their mark, but Mike's expression remained unyielding. It was clear that the cracks in the team were far from healed. Despite the tension, the event continued. Shaq stayed for hours, talking to customers, signing autographs, and even hopping into a few of the cars to demonstrate their features with his signature flair. His efforts helped keep the energy alive, and it wasn't long before the customer feedback started to improve. People were beginning to see the personal touch that had been missing, and many left the dealership with a renewed sense of optimism. Still, the real work was just beginning. Jerry knew that this was only a temporary fix. The damage caused by the viral video, the lingering doubt among the staff, and the division between the old way and the new direction had yet to be fully addressed. That night, as the dealership slowly emptied out, Jerry and Shaq found themselves alone in the showroom. The music had stopped, and the air felt unusually still. Shaq leaned against one of the cars, his expression thoughtful. "That went better than I thought," Shaq said, his deep voice echoing in the quiet room. "The event was a success, but you know as well as I do, this isn't the end. We've got a lot of work to do to win people over, for the customers and for the team." Jerry nodded. "I know. We've made progress, but we're still facing an uphill battle. Mike and the others, they're not convinced. And if they're not with us, we're going to have a hard time making this work long-term." Shaq stood up straighter, the fire in his eyes returning. Then we need to make it clear. We're not asking for anyone's permission. We're doing this because we believe it's the right move. If they're on board, great. If not, we'll move forward without them. But we're not turning back. Jerry stared at him for a moment, the weight of Shaq's words settling in. It was true, there was no going back. They had made their stand, and now they had to prove they could follow through. As they locked up for the night, Jerry felt a renewed sense of determination. He wasn't sure how much longer this struggle would last, but he knew one thing for sure, he wasn't giving up. They'd come this far, and he wasn't about to let the dealership, his future, Shaq's future, fall apart now. Only time would tell. But Jerry was ready to find out. It was only a few days after the event, but Jerry could already feel the pressure starting to mount again. The team had seemed to rally for a moment, but cracks were beginning to show once more. Mike was still outspoken in his disapproval, and a few other employees had begun to follow his lead. It wasn't just about the flashy decor or the oversized promotions anymore, it was about the heart of the dealership, the soul of what they had once stood for. Jerry wasn't blind to the fact that Shaq's vision had caused some cultural friction. The team that had once felt like a family was now torn between two competing ideals. It was becoming clear that Shaq's idea of fun, boldness, and entertainment wasn't connecting with everyone. And Jerry knew that if he didn't find a way to unite the team, the whole operation could come crashing down. That afternoon, Jerry sat in his office, his mind racing. He knew that he had to do something, make some kind of move to address the underlying tension and find a balance between Shaq's grand vision and the reality of the dealership's needs. He ran his fingers through his hair, trying to think of a solution that would bring the team back together. It wasn't long before his phone buzzed. It was a message from Shaq, "Let's meet up after hours. We need to talk about the next move. Call me when you're ready." Jerry exhaled sharply, knowing this conversation was inevitable. He had tried to avoid it for as long as he could, but now, there was no avoiding it. He needed to confront the real issue, the fact that they were running out of time to prove that this gamble could succeed. Later that evening, Jerry met Shaq at a small, quiet cafe near the dealership. It was a far cry from the hustle and bustle of the showroom, a place where they could have a real conversation without distractions. Shaq was already seated when Jerry arrived, his usual booming energy toned down for the night. "You okay?" Jerry asked, taking a seat across from him. Shaq gave him a small smile. "I'm good. Just tired, man. It's been a crazy couple of weeks, but I'm not backing down. This thing can still work." Jerry nodded, though he didn't feel nearly as optimistic. "I'm with you, Shaq. But we're running into a real problem here. The team is divided. The culture's shifting in ways I didn't expect. Mike's influence is spreading, and he's not alone." Shaq leaned forward, his brow furrowing. "What do you mean, Mike's influence?" "The dude's been resistant from day one." "I know," Jerry said. "But now it's not just Mike. A lot of people are starting to feel the same way. They think we're losing what made this place special. They think the changes are too much too fast." Shaq rubbed his chin, deep in thought. "So what, you want me to tone it down? Pull back on the big ideas?" Jerry hesitated. "Not pull back, just find a balance. I think people want to be a part of something exciting, but they also want to feel like the business is still focused on what really matters, customer service, good cars, and genuine relationships. If we don't address that, they'll walk." Shaq let out a sigh, then leaned back in his chair. "I get it, man. But you know me, I'm not here to play it safe. I've never been about that. I think we can still have that personal touch while making this place bigger than life. I don't want to dial it down. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page." Jerry looked at Shaq, his eyes serious. "Then maybe we need to change how we communicate this vision. We need to show people that they're part of something bigger than a show. They need to see the purpose behind the fun, not just the spectacle. Shaq thought for a moment. You're right. Maybe I've been so caught up in the big ideas that I didn't realize how important it is for the team to feel like they're really with me on this. Not just following orders, but part of the vision. Jerry could see the change in Shaq's demeanor. He was thinking about the bigger picture. Shaq had always been a man of grand gestures, but Jerry was starting to see that maybe it was time to scale back on the stunts and focus more on the dealership's identity. You know, Shaq continued, maybe we can hold a meeting with everyone. Be open about what we're trying to do and where we want to go. Let them ask questions, voice their concerns. If they feel like they're included in the process, it'll make a big difference. Jerry smiled slightly. I think that's the way forward. Let them be part of the journey, not just spectators. Shaq stood up, a determined look on his face. Let's do it. Let's turn this thing around the right way. The next morning, Jerry wasted no time setting up the meeting. He sent out an email to the entire staff, letting them know there would be a company-wide meeting that afternoon. He told them it was an opportunity to discuss the direction of the dealership and share any concerns they had. As the time for the meeting approached, Jerry could feel the tension building again. This was the moment where everything could either come together or fall apart. He and Shaq had decided that they would take an honest approach, addressing the concerns head-on and inviting feedback from everyone, no matter their role in the company. When the staff gathered in the showroom, the atmosphere was different than it had been before. The air was thick with uncertainty, but there was a palpable sense of curiosity, too. This was not just another team meeting, it was a chance for everyone to be heard. Jerry stood at the front of the room, Shaq beside him, both of them looking out at the group. Jerry could see that Mike was there, arms crossed, still skeptical but paying attention. A few other employees were leaning against the walls, watching with cautious eyes. We've gathered here today because we want to get everyone's thoughts on where we're headed, Jerry began. We've had some ups and downs lately, and I know there's been a lot of change. We want to be transparent with all of you and make sure we're on the same page. This dealership isn't just about cars. It's about people, relationships, and creating something bigger than ourselves. And we want all of you to be a part of that vision. Shaq stepped forward, his deep voice filling the room. I've always said, you can't build something great if you're not in it together. I know my approach has been bold, but I'm here to listen. Let's hear what you've got to say, and we'll figure this thing out together. The room fell into a tense silence. Then, slowly, Mike raised his hand. I've got a lot to say, Mike said, his voice steady but pointed. I think we've lost sight of what really matters here. It's not just about putting on a show, it's about providing a real service to our customers. If we focus too much on the spectacle, we're going to lose what made this place great in the first place. People aren't coming here for a circus. They're coming here for a car, for a personal experience. Jerry nodded, taking in Mike's words. We hear you, Mike. We want to make sure that the heart of the dealership, the customer experience, is never lost. We've made some changes, and they've been exciting, but we'll make sure that every customer gets the service they deserve, no matter what. Mike seemed to soften, just slightly, his arms unfolding. I just want to make sure we're still doing the right thing for the long term. We can't just chase the flashy stuff forever. Shaq smiled. I get it. We're going to strike that balance. Flash with substance. Big ideas with integrity. The room seemed to breathe a collective sigh of relief. It wasn't a resolution, not yet, but it was a start, a sign that the road ahead was still open, if they could just find the right way forward. As Jerry looked around the room, he felt a glimmer of hope. They were at a crossroads, but maybe, just maybe, they could make it work. The meeting that day had been a turning point, but Jerry knew the real challenge was in the follow-through. It wasn't enough to simply listen to the concerns and promise change, he had to prove it. Words were easy, but action was what would solidify their vision. The dealership was on the edge, and he wasn't about to let it all slip away just because they'd had a tense conversation. That night, Jerry stayed late, running through the feedback from the meeting in his mind. He had sensed a shift in Mike's attitude, though he wasn't ready to embrace the changes wholeheartedly. At least he wasn't actively resisting them anymore. Jerry knew that was progress, but it was only the beginning. He still needed to address the team's underlying fears and frustrations. The next day, Jerry called a smaller meeting with the department heads to put some concrete plans into motion. He was joined by Shaq, who had taken it upon himself to learn more about each department's day-to-day operations, something that hadn't been necessary when he was a sports icon, but here, in the world of business, it was vital. "I know we've made a lot of noise recently with the big ideas," Jerry started, looking at each of the department heads seated around the table. "But now it's time to focus on the details. We need to get this dealership running like a well-oiled machine, from top to bottom." Shaq leaned forward, his big frame taking up most of the space at the table. "I'm all in on making things right, but I also need you guys to show me the areas where we're not performing. I've seen the way we engage with customers, but I want to know what's happening behind the scenes. Let's talk about where we're falling short and how we can fix it." There was a slight pause as everyone exchanged wary glances. Jerry could tell that, while some were still hesitant, there were others who were beginning to take the opportunity seriously. It was this kind of honesty that would rebuild trust, but it would take time. "We need a plan," Jerry continued. "I want actionable items. From customer service to inventory management, let's break it down and see where we're underperforming. We'll track everything, so we can make the right changes and show the rest of the team that we're committed to moving forward." The next few weeks were a flurry of activity as Jerry and the department heads worked together to implement the changes that had been discussed. The sales team began offering more personalized services, learning the ins and outs of each vehicle so they could better connect with customers. The inventory team streamlined their process, reducing delays and ensuring that the cars customers wanted were on the lot and ready for sale. Shaq, for his part, threw himself into the task of becoming more involved with the day-to-day operations. Though he had once been a figurehead, a larger-than-life celebrity, he now took a hands-on approach. He made a point to speak with employees on all levels, from the front desk staff to the mechanics working in the back. He wasn't just Shaq, the basketball legend, he was Shaq, the leader who had a stake in the dealership's future. Despite all their efforts, though, there was still resistance. While things were better than before, there was no denying the tension that remained between the old guard and the new direction. Mike, though quieter, was still outspoken about his dissatisfaction with some of the changes, particularly when it came to Shaq's larger-than-life persona. One afternoon, Jerry called Mike into his office. They'd worked together for years, and Jerry had always respected his straightforward nature. But now, Jerry was beginning to question if Mike truly had the dealership's best interests at heart. "Mike, I want to talk," Jerry said, gesturing for him to sit. Mike sat down, looking more worn than usual. "Yeah, Jerry, I know what this is about. You want me to get on board with all the changes. The Shaq way, right?" Jerry sighed, rubbing his temples. "I don't want to force anything. I'm not here to tell you how to do your job. But I need you to understand that this is bigger than any one person. This is about the future of the dealership. I'm not asking for blind loyalty, I'm asking for collaboration. And if we can't do that, we're going to hit a wall. And I don't think we can afford that." Mike was quiet for a moment, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. He stared at the floor, then looked up at Jerry, his eyes finally softening. "I'm not against change, Jerry. But I don't want to see us lose what made this place special in the first place. I've been here for years, and I've seen the highs and lows. I don't want us to lose touch with the heart of the business. You know that's what matters." Jerry nodded, understanding the sentiment. "I get that, Mike. And I promise we're not going to forget the core of what makes this dealership work. But we have to adapt. The world's changing. We can't just sit back and expect things to stay the same. Mike was quiet again, and for a long moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, he stood up, extending his hand. "All right, Jerry. I'll give it a shot. But I need to see some of these changes actually work, not just talk. I'm in if you're in." Jerry shook Mike's hand firmly. "Deal. We're all in this together, Mike." With Mike's reluctant support secured, Jerry felt a sense of relief, though the road ahead was still full of obstacles. The dealership wasn't in the clear yet. There was still much to prove to the employees, to the customers, and to themselves. The next few weeks saw further improvements. Jerry and Shaq made sure to keep the communication lines open, holding regular meetings with the team to discuss progress and roadblocks. Slowly but surely, the team began to come together. The initial resistance began to soften, replaced by a renewed sense of purpose. The once divided staff was now starting to feel like a unit again, a team working toward a shared goal. But just when it seemed like everything was falling into place, something unexpected happened that would test everything they had worked for. It came in the form of an offer Jerry wasn't sure they could afford to ignore. And it would change everything. The road ahead had never seemed more uncertain, but one thing was clear: Jerry and Shaq weren't giving up now. Whatever came next, they would face it together, with determination and a drive to make this vision work, no matter the cost. The dealership's fate, their future, would be decided in the next few days. But would it be enough? The dealership had started to feel like it was on the verge of turning a corner. The team was more united, the sales were rising, and even the once skeptical Mike had begun to show signs of genuine support for the changes they were implementing. Shaq had integrated himself deeply into the daily operations, and his leadership was slowly becoming more effective. It felt like the dealership was finally hitting its stride. But as Jerry sat in his office, reviewing the latest financial reports, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was lurking just beyond their reach. The dealership's performance had improved, but they still faced the harsh realities of the market: rising competition, tighter margins, and the pressure to grow quickly. It wasn't enough to just survive anymore, they needed to thrive. That's when the phone rang. "Jerry Carter," came the voice on the other end, smooth and professional. "This is Jerry," he replied, shifting in his seat, trying to adjust his thoughts to the call. "Good afternoon. This is Brian Thompson from Autoline Investments. I'm reaching out because we've been following your dealership's progress, and we're very interested in what you're building there. We'd like to discuss a potential partnership with you." Jerry's heart skipped a beat. A partnership? He hadn't been expecting anything like this. Not now. Not when things were just starting to come together. A partnership? Jerry asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "I'm listening." Brian continued, "Yes, we've been monitoring your dealership's evolution under Shaq's leadership, and we see a lot of potential for growth. We're a private equity firm with a focus on the automotive industry, and we believe that with the right investment, your dealership could become a major player in the region. We'd be willing to make a substantial offer to help accelerate that growth." Jerry felt a knot form in his stomach. This could be the answer to the dealership's problems. The financial boost they needed could be within reach, but was it worth it? Would accepting this offer compromise their vision for the future? "I'm interested, but before we go any further, I need to know what you're offering, and what you're asking in return," Jerry said, his mind racing. He couldn't afford to make a rash decision. "We'd be willing to offer you a significant capital investment, Jerry," Brian replied smoothly. "Enough to expand your operations, revamp your facilities, and scale up your marketing efforts. In return, we'd want a controlling interest in the dealership, along with a seat on the board to help guide the direction of the business. We understand that Shaq's vision is important, but we need to ensure that the right leadership is in place to maximize profitability." Jerry's pulse quickened. Controlling interest. A seat on the board. This wasn't just a simple partnership, it was a power play. They'd be giving up some of the control they'd fought so hard to regain. I see, Jerry said slowly, weighing the offer. And what exactly would my role be in this scenario? You'd remain as the face of the dealership, Brian answered, but the daily decisions would be in the hands of our team. We believe that with the right structure, your dealership can achieve much greater success, but we'll need to have the final say in key decisions. We're willing to offer you a fair salary, of course, and your involvement will still be valued. Jerry sat back in his chair, staring out the window, the city skyline before him blurring in his mind. He had always believed that the dealership's strength lay in its personal touch, its individuality, and the close-knit team he had built. Shaq had helped bring that vision to life in a new way, but now this offer seemed to challenge everything they had worked for. He thought about Shaq, about the countless hours they'd spent transforming the dealership into something bigger than just a car lot. Was he ready to risk all of that for the sake of financial growth? Could they really hand over control and still retain the spirit of what they had started? Before he could answer, Brian's voice broke into his thoughts. Jerry, we're prepared to move quickly on this. We know that the automotive market is volatile, and we want to be there to help you capitalize on the opportunities that are ahead. We'd like to set up a meeting with you and Shaquille in person to discuss the details. What do you think? Jerry's mind raced. He was torn between the undeniable appeal of the offer and the loyalty he felt to the team, to Shaq, and to the vision they had built together. He knew that accepting the deal could mean faster growth and a much-needed boost in finances, but it could also mean losing control over the direction of the dealership, and with it, losing what made the dealership unique. I'll need some time to think about it, Jerry said, his voice measured. I'll get back to you in a few days. Of course, Jerry. We understand. Take your time, but know that we're serious. This is a great opportunity for everyone involved. The call ended, and Jerry sat still for a long moment, the weight of the decision settling over him like a heavy fog. Was this the opportunity they had been waiting for? Or was it a dangerous temptation that could undo everything they had worked so hard to build? Later that day, Jerry met with Shaq in his office. He could tell that Shaq had noticed the shift in his demeanor. What's going on? Shaq asked, his tone serious but concerned. You look like you've seen a ghost. Jerry took a deep breath, sitting down across from Shaq. He didn't know where to start, how to explain the gravity of the situation. There's an offer on the table, Jerry began slowly. Autoline Investments, they're a private equity firm. They've been watching us, and they want to partner up. They're offering a significant investment, enough to take us to the next level. But in return, they want controlling interest in the dealership. Shaq's eyes narrowed. Controlling interest? What does that mean for us? They want a seat on the board, a say in all major decisions. We'd still be involved, but it wouldn't be the same, Jerry explained, the words feeling like they were weighing him down. We'd get the money to expand, to grow faster. But we'd lose some control. We'd have to answer to them in ways we never have before. Shaq leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. For a long moment, he said nothing, just stared out the window. Jerry could tell he was processing everything. Finally, Shaq spoke, his voice calm but firm. What do you think, Jerry? Is this the right move for us? Jerry shook his head, his mind still spinning. I don't know. It's a big decision. On one hand, the financial support could be exactly what we need. But on the other hand, we've worked so hard to get to where we are now. We've built something that's ours. Can we really give that up? Shaq's eyes softened. I get it. But remember, Jerry, we can't do this alone forever. It's a tough decision, but we've got to think about what's best for the future. We can keep our values, keep the heart of what we've built, but we might need their resources to make that happen. It's not about losing ourselves, it's about growing in a way that keeps us strong. Jerry nodded slowly, taking in Shaq's words. They were right. This was about balance. Growth versus identity. The future was out there, waiting to be shaped, but at what cost? They didn't have an answer yet, but Jerry knew one thing for sure: the road ahead was going to be far more complicated than they had ever anticipated. The days following the call with Autoline Investments felt like a blur to Jerry. Every time he tried to sleep, his mind raced with the implications of the offer. He couldn't stop thinking about how close they were to securing the future of the dealership, yet it came at the cost of control, something that had been so central to their journey so far. Jerry and Shaq had spent hours discussing the pros and cons, but neither of them had come to a firm conclusion. It wasn't just about the money, it was about the heart of what they had built, and the fear of losing that in the pursuit of growth. Jerry leaned over his desk, staring at the contract Autoline Investments had sent over. It was thick with legal jargon, but the parts that stood out to him were clear. They wanted 51% of the dealership, a majority stake, which meant they would have the final say in all major decisions. Their offer was enticing: millions of dollars, enough to expand the dealership's operations, revamp its branding, and make them a serious competitor in the region. But at what cost? Shaq had made his stance clear. He was ready to move forward, recognizing that the dealership couldn't stay stagnant. His past had taught him that sometimes taking risks and pushing boundaries were the keys to success. But Jerry was different. He'd built this place from the ground up. He had poured his heart and soul into it. And the thought of someone else taking the reins, of losing the personal touch that had set them apart from other dealerships, made his stomach turn. As Jerry pondered the decision, he found himself walking into the showroom the next morning. The dealership was quiet, the morning light filtering through the windows and casting long shadows on the showroom floor. He could almost hear the echoes of the old days, when it was just him and a handful of loyal employees working day and night to keep things running. And then, as he turned the corner, he saw her, Emily. She was standing by one of the cars, a new model that had just arrived. Emily had been with the dealership from the beginning. She wasn't just a sales associate, she was one of the people who had believed in Jerry's vision long before Shaq ever walked through those doors. She had been there when things were tough, when they barely had enough to keep the lights on. And now, as he watched her walk across the showroom floor, he couldn't help but think of how far they had come. "Hey, Emily," Jerry said, walking up to her. She looked up, her smile warm. "Good morning, Jerry. How's it going?" "Busy," he replied with a sigh. "Busy in a way I'm not sure I'm ready for." Emily tilted her head, sensing something was on his mind. "What's going on?" Jerry hesitated. He wasn't sure if he should talk to her about the offer from Autoline. She wasn't a part of the decision-making team, but she had been there from the start. She knew the heart and soul of the dealership. Maybe she could offer him a perspective he hadn't considered. "Do you ever think about how far we've come?" Jerry asked, his voice thoughtful. "Of course," Emily said with a laugh. "It feels like a lifetime ago when we were just trying to get one car sold a month." Jerry chuckled. "Yeah. Things have definitely changed." He paused, looking out over the showroom floor, before turning back to her. "I've been offered a deal, Emily. A big one. They want to partner with us, invest a lot of money in the dealership. But in exchange, they want to take control. We'd still be here, but they'd be calling the shots. And I'm not sure if I'm ready for that." Emily studied him for a long moment, her gaze thoughtful. "You know, Jerry, when I first started here, I had no idea what I was getting into. But I saw something in you. Something that made me believe in what we were building. This place, it's not just about the cars. It's about the people, the relationships, and the way we've always treated our customers like family. If we lose that, I don't know what's left." Jerry's chest tightened at her words. She was right. The dealership was more than just a business to him, it was a family. But could they really keep that spirit alive if they accepted Autoline's offer? "Are we really ready to give that up?" Emily asked, her voice soft but strong. Is the money worth it if we lose what makes us different? What makes us special? Jerry didn't know how to answer her question. His instinct told him to hold on to what they had built, to preserve the heart of the dealership. But the reality of the market, the competition, the changing landscape, wasn't going to wait for him to make up his mind. I don't know, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. But I need to figure it out. For all of us. Later that day, Jerry and Shaq sat down again to talk. This time, they were more focused, the weight of the decision pressing down on both of them. Jerry had spent the morning reflecting on everything Emily had said, and it had stirred something inside him. The dealership wasn't just a business, it was a legacy. And maybe, just maybe, they could find a way to grow without losing that legacy. We can't just sell out, Jerry said, his voice firm. This place, it's us. It's who we are. I don't want to hand over control to anyone else. Shaq looked at him, understanding in his eyes. I get it, man. I do. But think about what we can do with that kind of capital. We can expand, we can reach more customers, and we can make sure our values stay at the core of everything we do. We don't have to lose who we are. We can use their money to fuel our vision, not theirs. Jerry frowned. But what if it changes us? What if we get too big and forget why we started this in the first place? Shaq leaned forward, his hands clasped together. I hear you, Jerry. But remember, we're the ones who'll still be here. We'll still have our say. It's not about giving up, it's about making the right moves to stay ahead of the game. We'll keep our vision, but we need to be smart about it. Jerry thought about Shaq's words, weighing them carefully. It wasn't easy, but it made sense. They had a chance to grow, to make the dealership stronger than ever. But it wouldn't be easy to hold on to their core values in the process. The next steps they took would need to be carefully planned. I guess we'll have to talk to them, Jerry said finally. But we do it on our terms. We don't give up our soul. Shaq smiled. Exactly. Let's make this work, for us. And with that, Jerry knew they were closer to a decision. It wouldn't be easy, but together, they would find a way to keep the dealership's heart intact, no matter what. The meeting with Autoline Investments was set. Jerry had spent the past few days thinking about every possible angle. He'd discussed it with Shaq, Emily, and even Mike, weighing the pros and cons of the deal. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about the future of the dealership, about staying true to the vision they had built together, and about ensuring that they weren't sacrificing their integrity in the process. It was a crisp morning when Jerry and Shaq arrived at the sleek office building where Autoline Investments was headquartered. The lobby was modern, polished, with tall glass windows offering a breathtaking view of the city. The air smelled faintly of fresh coffee, and the sound of quiet conversation and clicking keyboards filled the space. It all felt so corporate. So far removed from the dealership, the familiar environment where Jerry had spent years building something from the ground up. Here we go, Shaq said, giving Jerry a reassuring slap on the back as they stepped off the elevator. Jerry nodded, trying to calm the nerves rising in his chest. Let's just make sure we stay true to ourselves, no matter what. Shaq grinned. Don't worry, we'll get through this. We're a team. They were led into a large conference room, where a group of well-dressed executives were waiting for them. At the head of the table was Brian Thompson, the man Jerry had spoken with on the phone, along with a few others who Jerry assumed were part of the decision-making team. Gentlemen, Brian greeted them with a firm handshake. Thank you for coming. We've been following your progress closely, and we're excited to discuss the possibilities of partnering together. Jerry gave a polite smile, but he could feel the tension building inside him. He had come into this meeting with one goal, to ensure that they could maintain control over the dealership's core values. The money and resources were appealing, but not if it meant losing the spirit of what they had worked so hard to create. Brian gestured to the seats around the table. Please, have a seat. We've reviewed the financials and market potential for your dealership, and we're confident that with our support, we can help you grow exponentially. Our proposal includes not only a large capital investment but also the strategic guidance you'll need to scale quickly in a competitive market. Jerry took a seat, glancing over at Shaq. He could see the same determination in Shaq's eyes. They weren't going to make this decision lightly. Let's talk specifics, Jerry said, his voice steady. We're interested, but we need to be clear on a few points. First, we've built this business on relationships with our customers, with our team, with the community. We want to make sure that remains a priority if we move forward with this deal. We won't compromise on that. Brian nodded, taking notes on a pad in front of him. Absolutely. We understand the importance of customer loyalty, Jerry. We're not suggesting that you lose that focus. What we're offering is the opportunity to accelerate that growth, to bring in more customers and expand your reach. Our team can provide expertise in areas like marketing, customer acquisition, and operations. But we're not here to change your vision, we're here to support it. Jerry's brow furrowed. But you want controlling interest. That means you'll have the final say in decisions. How do we balance that with the need to stay true to our mission? Shaq leaned forward, his voice calm but firm. We need to be sure that even if we take this deal, we still have a hand in shaping the direction of the business. We're not looking for a hands-off partnership. We want to be involved in every step of the process. Brian's eyes met Shaq's, and he smiled. I understand your concerns. Here's what I propose. We'll give you a larger say in the key decisions that affect the dealership's day-to-day operations, particularly when it comes to maintaining your core values. We understand that the personal touch and customer-first mentality are critical to your success. What we're asking for is a say in the larger, strategic decisions that will help scale the business. Jerry exchanged a glance with Shaq. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was closer than he had hoped for. They needed to grow, and they needed the resources to do it. But that couldn't come at the expense of everything they had worked for. So, you're saying we'd have a seat at the table for major decisions, but ultimately, you would have the final say? Jerry asked, trying to clarify. That's correct, Brian replied, nodding. But we're open to negotiating the terms to ensure that you feel comfortable with the structure. This is about partnership, not control. We want you to feel that you still have a voice. Shaq leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. We'll need assurances in writing that our core values will remain in place, that customer service, community involvement, and loyalty are at the heart of everything we do. If we lose that, we lose what makes us special. Brian's expression softened. We're on the same page there. We know that your reputation is built on those values, and we don't want to change that. This is about finding a way to take what you've already built and scale it for the future, without losing the essence of who you are. The meeting continued for hours, with Jerry and Shaq negotiating the finer details of the deal. They discussed everything from the terms of the investment to the specific responsibilities Autoline would have in the partnership. By the end of the day, they had made progress, but the deal still wasn't finalized. There were too many loose ends, too many questions about the future. But one thing was clear, they weren't going to let go of their identity. They couldn't afford to. As Jerry and Shaq walked out of the meeting room, Jerry couldn't help but feel a sense of cautious optimism. The deal wasn't perfect, but they were closer to finding a solution that worked for both sides. It wasn't going to be easy, and there were still plenty of hurdles to overcome, but it felt like a step in the right direction. What do you think? Shaq asked as they walked to the elevator. Jerry thought for a moment. I think we're getting there. But we've got to keep pushing. This is just the beginning. Shaq smiled. Exactly. We've come this far. We're not backing down now. As the elevator doors closed, Jerry couldn't help but feel the weight of the decision that lay ahead. They had a chance to secure the future of the dealership, but it would require balancing their vision with the reality of the market. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a step forward. And for now, that would have to be enough. The following days felt like a whirlwind for Jerry and Shaq. The meeting with Autoline Investments had ended with a tentative agreement, but nothing was set in stone yet. They were still in the negotiation phase, working out the finer details of the deal. The prospect of a partnership that could change everything for the dealership weighed heavily on both of them. The money, the resources, it was all tempting, but the more Jerry thought about it, the more uncertain he became. Could they really strike a deal with Autoline and still maintain the soul of their business? Shaq, on the other hand, was optimistic. He was ready to take the leap, believing the partnership would be a game-changer for the dealership. With their brand recognized on a larger scale, they could increase their customer base, improve operations, and grow in ways they hadn't even imagined. But for Jerry, it wasn't just about the growth, it was about preserving the personal touch that had made their dealership so special. He had spent years forging relationships with customers, building trust, and creating a family atmosphere. Could they really maintain that, even as they expanded? Or would they become just another corporate entity, driven by numbers and quarterly reports? One afternoon, as Jerry sat in his office sifting through paperwork, his phone buzzed with a message from Emily. Emily. Hey, just wanted to let you know that I've been getting some feedback from the team. People are nervous about the changes. They're wondering if we'll still be able to keep things personal with Autoline in the picture. Jerry read the message twice before putting the phone down, deep in thought. The last thing he wanted was for his team to feel disconnected from the process. They had worked too hard to build a community within the dealership, and he didn't want to lose that, especially not now, when they were on the brink of something huge. He leaned back in his chair and exhaled slowly. What if they're right, he muttered to himself. What if the price of growth is too high? Later that day, Shaq stopped by his office after a long meeting with the marketing team. You okay? Shaq asked, noticing Jerry's somber expression. You've been quiet all day. Jerry looked up from his desk, his mind still racing. I got a message from Emily. She says the team's getting nervous about Autoline. They're worried about losing the personal touch we've always had with our customers. I can't blame them. I'm starting to feel the same way. Shaq paused, processing what Jerry had said. I get it, man. It's a big change, and people are scared of it. But we can't let fear hold us back. This is a chance to do something bigger. I'm telling you, once we bring in the investment, we can still keep the values that matter. We'll just have more resources to grow the family we've already built. I want to believe that, Jerry said, leaning forward. But what if it doesn't work that way? What if we end up losing control and becoming something we never wanted to be? Shaq sat down across from Jerry, his expression serious. We're not just handing over control, Jerry. We're still here. We're still calling the shots. Autoline's just helping us take the next step. If we get too big, too fast, it's not going to be the same. But if we do this right, we can grow without losing what makes us unique. Jerry stared at Shaq for a moment, weighing his words. He wanted to believe in what Shaq was saying, but the nagging feeling in the back of his mind wouldn't go away. I don't know, Jerry said quietly. I don't want to risk everything we've worked for. What if it's all for nothing? Shaq gave him a reassuring smile. It's not for nothing, Jerry. We've built something special. And this is our chance to make sure it continues for years to come. We can still be ourselves, but on a bigger stage. Jerry rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on him. They had come so far, but now the stakes were higher than ever. It wasn't just about the money anymore, it was about the future of the dealership, and about whether they could keep the heart of the business intact. That night, Jerry found himself back at the dealership, walking the showroom floor alone. The place felt different now, emptier somehow. It wasn't just the cars, the shiny new models lined up along the walls. It was the feeling in the air, the sense that everything was about to change. He paused in front of the desk where he'd spent countless hours signing paperwork, answering phone calls, and making deals. This was the place where it had all started. What am I doing? Jerry whispered to himself, feeling a pang of doubt. Am I really willing to give this up for something I'm not sure about? Suddenly, he heard the familiar sound of footsteps approaching. He turned to see Emily walking toward him, her expression thoughtful. "Hey," she said softly, stopping in front of him. "Can we talk?" Jerry nodded, motioning for her to sit. "Of course." Emily sat down, her gaze steady as she looked up at him. "I know you're thinking a lot about this deal with Autoline. And I just wanted to say, I understand why you're torn. But I want you to know something, this place, this family we've built, it's more than just a business. It's about the people. It's about us. And I believe that no matter what happens, we can stay true to that. But it's up to us to make sure it doesn't get lost along the way." Jerry felt a lump form in his throat at her words. It was exactly what he had been feeling but couldn't put into words. The dealership wasn't just a business to him, it was his life. It was the people who believed in him, who had stuck with him through thick and thin. They had built something together, something that was bigger than any one of them. "I don't want to lose that, Emily," Jerry said, his voice rough. "I don't want us to become just another dealership, just another name on a sign. I want us to be more." "I know," Emily said, her voice soft but resolute. "And I think we can be. But we have to make the decision. We can't let fear stop us from growing. We just have to make sure we grow in the right way." Jerry sat in silence for a moment, her words sinking in. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for sure, he couldn't make this decision alone. He needed his team, his family, behind him. The next day, Jerry called a meeting with the entire team. He wanted everyone to have a voice in the decision. He needed their input. And together, they would figure out a way forward. As he stood at the front of the room, ready to share the details of the offer from Autoline Investments, Jerry couldn't help but feel a sense of hope. No matter what happened next, they would face it together. And that was something no deal could take away from them. The meeting room was filled with a palpable sense of tension as Jerry stood at the front, looking at the familiar faces of his team. The salespeople, the service crew, the office staff, each of them had played a crucial role in the success of the dealership, and now their futures were intertwined with a decision that could change everything. Shaq stood by his side, hands clasped in front of him, waiting for Jerry to speak. The room fell silent as Jerry cleared his throat. His heart was pounding in his chest, and he could feel the weight of the moment settling on his shoulders. "All right, everyone," Jerry began, his voice steady despite the nerves that threatened to rise. "You all know that we've been offered a partnership with Autoline Investments. It's a big deal, and it's one that could set us up for major growth. The money, the resources, they're all there. But, I've been thinking a lot about this over the past few days, and I know you all have too. This isn't just about the money, it's about what kind of company we want to be, and whether we can grow without losing the things that make us special." He paused, scanning the room, making eye contact with each person. "So, I'm asking all of you to help me make this decision. I don't want to do this alone. We've built something here together, and your opinions matter. You're the ones who've put in the hard work every day, and you're the ones who will feel the impact of this change the most." Jerry's gaze lingered on Emily, who gave him a small nod of encouragement. It was clear that she, too, wanted everyone's voice to be heard. "I've shared the proposal with all of you," Jerry continued, his tone growing more serious. "We've had the negotiations with Autoline, and they've offered us an investment that would allow us to scale the business. They'd take controlling interest, but they've agreed to give us a significant say in the decisions that matter to us, particularly when it comes to keeping the personal, customer-first approach that's always been at our core." He looked around the room again, watching as the employees exchanged glances. Some looked excited, others apprehensive. Jerry knew the stakes were high. "I won't sugarcoat it," Jerry said, leaning forward slightly. "This isn't an easy decision. We can take the deal, and we could grow faster than we ever imagined. But we could also lose what makes us different. We could lose the sense of community we've built here. So, I'm asking you, do we go forward with this deal? Or do we keep things as they are, and try to build something at our own pace, without the help of an outside investor?" The room was silent for a long moment. Jerry could feel the tension mounting, the weight of the decision pressing on everyone. Finally, Emily spoke up, her voice calm but filled with conviction. "I think we should go for it," she said, her eyes meeting Jerry's. "We've worked hard to get here, but if we stay small, we'll never be able to reach the people who need us. We've built a great reputation, but now we need the resources to grow it. Autoline isn't offering us a chance to sell out, they're offering us a chance to scale up, to do more of what we've been doing, but on a bigger stage." Jerry's heart clenched at her words. He had known that Emily would be the one to speak first, she was always the voice of reason. But her support also meant that the rest of the team would be listening closely to her opinion. "I agree with Emily," said Mike, the head mechanic. "We've been busting our asses to keep this place running, and it's not easy. I love what we've built here, but we can't keep running at the same pace forever. If Autoline can help us take this to the next level without changing what makes us special, then why not take the opportunity?" "I'm with Mike," said Sarah, the receptionist, who had always been quiet but had been with the dealership from the very beginning. "We can't keep going in circles. We need the resources to compete with the bigger players. If we don't take this chance, we could fall behind." One by one, the team members began to speak up, each offering their thoughts. The majority were in favor of moving forward with the deal, but a few voices still expressed doubt. "I get what everyone's saying," said Jack, one of the salespeople. "But I'm worried that we'll lose the personal touch. We've always been a family here. What if Autoline changes all of that? What if it becomes about the numbers and not about the relationships?" Jerry took a deep breath, nodding as Jack spoke. He understood the concern, it was something that weighed heavily on him as well. "That's a valid point," Jerry said, looking around the room. "And that's why we need to be firm in the deal. We've made it clear to Autoline that the personal connection is non-negotiable. We can grow, but we can't lose what's made us who we are. And if they're really on board with that, then we'll have to hold them to it. If at any point we feel like we're losing control, we can reevaluate." Shaq, who had been quiet until now, finally spoke up. "Look, I've been where you are, Jack. I've worried about losing what makes us different. But the reality is, if we stay small, we won't be able to compete. This isn't about turning into a corporate machine. It's about making sure we stay true to our values while reaching a bigger audience. If we don't make this move, we risk getting left behind." Shaq's words had the desired effect. The team seemed to rally behind the idea that they could grow while still maintaining their core values. But there was still a lingering uncertainty in the air. Jerry could feel it. This was a monumental decision, one that would shape the future of the dealership, and everyone knew it. "All right," Jerry said, his voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside him. "I think we're all leaning in the same direction, but I want to be sure. I want everyone to have their say. So, let's vote. If you're in favor of moving forward with the deal, raise your hand." The room was silent for a moment, and then, one by one, the hands began to go up. Emily, Mike, Sarah, Jack, they all raised their hands in support of the deal. Shaq's hand shot up without hesitation. Jerry glanced around the room, his gaze stopping on each hand that was raised. Then, finally, his own hand went up. "We'll do it," he said quietly. "We'll take the deal." The room erupted into applause, a mix of relief and excitement filling the air. The weight of the decision had been lifted, and now, they could move forward. There were still challenges ahead, of course, there always were, but for the first time in a long while, Jerry felt hopeful. They had made the choice together, and that made all the difference. As the meeting wound down and everyone filed out of the room, Jerry stood there for a moment, staring at the empty space. It was over. The deal was happening. And as he looked around, he realized that the family he had built was still there, stronger than ever. No matter what the future held, they would face it together. As the paperwork was signed and the formalities completed, a sense of accomplishment washed over Jerry. They had done it. They had secured the future of the dealership and, in doing so, ensured the longevity of what they had worked so hard to build. But as the days passed, an underlying sense of unease lingered. Jerry couldn't help but wonder, what would it feel like when the ink dried? Would they truly be able to maintain the close-knit culture they had spent years cultivating, or would the influence of Autoline slowly begin to change everything? One evening, as Jerry was locking up the dealership, he sat down in the same office where he had spent so many late nights, reflecting on the journey so far. His thoughts were interrupted by a sudden knock on the door. "Hey, Jerry," Shaq's voice called out from the other side. "Got a minute?" "Of course," Jerry said, standing up and opening the door. Shaq stepped inside, a broad grin on his face. The tension that had been weighing on Jerry seemed to lift a little at the sight of his friend. "We did it, man," Shaq said, his voice filled with excitement. "The deal is done. It's official. Autoline's on board. And they're ready to move forward. This is the beginning of something huge." Jerry smiled faintly, but the weight of the decision still hung on his mind. "I know. But it's still a little surreal, you know. I keep thinking about what happens next. We've worked so hard to make this place feel like home. Will it stay that way?" Shaq's smile softened, his eyes filled with understanding. "I get it. It's a big change. But that's the thing, Jerry. We're still in control. Autoline's here to help us grow, not to take over. We've got the final say on the things that matter, like keeping our team and our customers at the center of what we do. This is just the beginning, but we've got a chance to make sure we're still running things the way we always have." Jerry nodded slowly, though a small knot remained in his stomach. "I hope you're right. I really do." Shaq clapped Jerry on the shoulder. "I know I'm right. This is what we've been working toward. And we're going to make it work. You'll see." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Autoline Investments was eager to get the ball rolling, and the changes started happening fast. New marketing strategies were put in place, including a brand overhaul, and the dealership began receiving more inventory than ever before. The showroom floor was filled with sleek, high-end cars that Jerry never thought he'd have the opportunity to sell. It was exhilarating, and overwhelming. At the same time, Jerry noticed subtle shifts in the atmosphere. Some employees seemed excited by the prospect of change, while others remained skeptical, unsure of how the new ownership would affect their daily lives. Emily, always a steady presence, continued to reassure the team, reminding them that the company's values wouldn't change, but even she couldn't deny the anxiety that hung in the air. One afternoon, as Jerry walked through the showroom, he overheard a conversation between two of the salespeople, Brian and Laura. They were discussing the recent changes in the dealership's management and wondering what the future would hold. "Do you think things will really stay the same?" Brian asked, his voice low. "I mean, Autoline's big, what if we end up just being another cog in the machine?" Laura shrugged. "I don't know. It's hard to say. But I trust Jerry and Shaq. If they say we're still in control, I believe them. They've always had our backs." Jerry paused, listening to their words. It was clear that some employees were still uncertain about the future. He understood their concerns. He was feeling them too. The transition to a larger, more corporate structure was never easy, and the pressure was mounting as they adjusted to the new reality. Later that day, Jerry met with Shaq in his office. "Hey, man," Jerry said as Shaq took a seat across from him. "Have you noticed how some of the team is acting? There's a lot of uncertainty in the air. People are starting to question whether we'll still be the same dealership we've always been. What can we do to make sure they know that we haven't forgotten where we came from?" Shaq leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping lightly on the desk. "I've noticed it too. And I get it, it's a big change, and change always makes people uneasy. But we've got to keep reinforcing the message, we're not losing the heart of this place. We're expanding, but we're doing it with purpose. We need to keep the lines of communication open and make sure everyone understands that we're still a family." Jerry nodded thoughtfully. "I think you're right. We've got to lead by example. If we show them that we're still committed to our values, they'll follow suit. But it's going to take time." Shaq smiled. "Exactly. Time, consistency, and a little patience. And, of course, we'll keep the team in the loop every step of the way." Jerry let out a sigh, feeling the weight of the responsibility on his shoulders. "I just hope we can do it. I don't want to lose what we've worked so hard to build." "You won't," Shaq assured him. "We're in this together. And if we stick to our guns, we'll make sure that this place stays the way it was always meant to be. Bigger, better, but still true to its roots." A few days later, Jerry called another all-hands meeting. This time, he wanted to address the team directly, to reassure them that the changes happening weren't about losing the essence of the dealership, it was about amplifying it. He knew that they had to act quickly to keep the team's morale high, and he wasn't about to let fear of change stand in their way. As the employees gathered in the meeting room, Jerry stood at the front, a sense of resolve in his posture. "I know there's been a lot of uncertainty lately," Jerry began, his voice calm but firm. "And I want to be honest with you all. Yes, we've entered into a partnership with Autoline Investments. And yes, that means things are going to change, there's no denying that. But what I want you to understand is that those changes are happening to make us stronger, to help us grow. We're not selling out. We're just scaling up. And that means we're going to have more resources, more cars, more customers. But we're still going to be the same family you've always known. Our values, our commitment to our customers, that's not changing." The room was quiet as Jerry spoke, but he could feel the tension easing. People were listening. They were processing what he was saying. And, for the first time in weeks, Jerry felt a surge of confidence. "Together, we've built something special," Jerry continued. "And together, we'll keep it that way. The future is bright, and I'm excited to see where we can go. So let's keep working hard, keep supporting each other, and keep making this place a great place to work and a great place for our customers." There was a long pause before the room erupted into applause. It wasn't unanimous yet, there were still some who had reservations, but the majority were on board. The seed of hope had been planted, and Jerry knew that with time, it would grow into something stronger. As the meeting ended, Jerry caught Shaq's eye across the room. Shaq gave him a thumbs up, a silent confirmation that they had taken the right step. The deal was sealed, and the road ahead would be full of challenges, but for the first time in a long time, Jerry felt like they were ready for whatever came next. The days following the announcement of the new partnership were a whirlwind of activity. The dealership was buzzing with changes, new signage went up, inventory expanded, and there was a sense of urgency that hadn't been present before. Autoline Investments was eager to see the results of their venture, and Jerry and Shaq were determined to prove they were more than capable of managing it. It was during the first big promotional event under Autoline's banner that the true test began. The dealership had organized a massive weekend sale to show off the expanded inventory and attract a bigger crowd. Shaq was handling the promotional side of things, while Jerry focused on the operations, ensuring the team was prepared for the surge of customers. The stakes were high, it wasn't just about selling cars, it was about proving that the dealership could handle the pressure and still maintain the personal touch they'd built their reputation on. The event started off well. The showroom floor was packed with potential buyers, and the energy was high. The salespeople were working overtime, hustling to close deals, and everyone seemed excited by the opportunity. But as the day went on, Jerry started to notice something that made his heart sink. Despite the positive energy, there was an unmistakable shift in the way things were running. The personal touches that had made the dealership stand out were starting to slip. The salespeople were no longer taking the time to engage with customers the way they used to. The personalized service that had always been a cornerstone of their business felt like it was being sacrificed for speed. The customers seemed more like numbers than individuals. Jerry watched from the sidelines, his mind racing. It was happening. The shift he had feared was starting to take hold. He could feel his chest tighten as he scanned the room, his gaze falling on Emily, who was working with a couple by the corner. She had always been the glue that held everything together, and now, he noticed, her warm smile seemed a little more forced than usual. He quickly made his way over to her. "Hey, Emily, how's everything going?" he asked, trying to keep his voice light despite the storm brewing inside him. She turned to him with a tight smile. "It's good, Jerry. Really good. We've had a lot of foot traffic, which is great. But, Jerry prompted, his brow furrowing. "But I think we might be losing something," Emily said quietly, glancing over at the crowded showroom. "The sales team is pushing hard to meet their targets, and while that's important, I'm seeing more customers feeling like they're being rushed through the process. It's not the same feeling we had before. People aren't getting the full experience. It's becoming transactional." Jerry's stomach dropped. He had feared this very thing. The dealership had always been about relationships, building trust with their customers, making them feel like they were part of something more than just a sale. And now, with the pressure of numbers and quotas, that sense of trust was slipping away. "I see it too," Jerry said softly, his voice laced with frustration. "We've got to fix this, Emily. We can't let it turn into just a numbers game. We have to find a way to balance the growth with the personal service." Emily nodded, clearly feeling the weight of the situation. "I agree. But we need to have the right conversations with the team. We need to remind them what we stand for, remind them that it's not just about closing the deal, it's about making sure the customer feels like they made the right choice." Jerry took a deep breath, running a hand through his hair. "We'll talk to them after the event. This can't keep going like this. We'll have to sit down with everyone and refocus on what matters." As the event continued, Jerry's mind raced. Every sale made him feel more conflicted. On the one hand, the dealership was hitting its sales targets, something they'd never done before, but on the other, the loss of personal touch was something that Jerry couldn't ignore. This wasn't the dealership he had built, and it wasn't the experience their customers had come to expect. By the end of the day, Jerry was exhausted, physically and emotionally drained. He couldn't remember the last time he'd felt so conflicted. As the last customers filtered out of the showroom and the sales team began to clean up, Jerry called a meeting. He gathered everyone in the back office, his eyes scanning the room as he took his place at the front. Shaq stood beside him, and Emily was there too, her expression serious. "We need to talk," Jerry began, his voice steady but firm. "I've been watching today, and I'm seeing something that concerns me. We've had a lot of success in terms of sales, but I'm worried we're losing what makes us who we are. The personal touch. The feeling that we're not just selling cars, we're building relationships. That's the heart of this place, and if we don't stay true to it, we'll lose everything we've worked for." The room was silent, the weight of Jerry's words sinking in. He could see the guilt on some faces. They knew what he was talking about. But they also knew the pressure they were under to meet quotas and targets. "I know we're all working hard to keep up with the numbers," Jerry continued. "But I need everyone to remember why we're here. We're not just a dealership. We're a family. We're a place where people trust us, where they feel like they belong. And that's something we can't sacrifice. We can grow and be successful, but we can't forget who we are. Shaq stepped forward then, his voice booming as he addressed the team. What Jerry's saying is exactly right. We've got the potential to be bigger and better, but we have to do it on our terms. We're not going to become another corporate dealership that treats people like transactions. We're going to grow, but we're going to do it with the same values that got us here in the first place. There was a long pause as everyone took in the message. Slowly, the mood in the room shifted from guilt to determination. The team was on board. They knew what was at stake. We've got a lot of work to do, Jerry concluded. But I believe in this team. I believe in all of you. Let's get back to the basics. Let's make sure every customer who walks through that door knows they're not just a sale, they're part of our family. As the meeting broke up, Jerry felt a sense of relief wash over him. The dealership had passed its first big test, and while it wasn't perfect, they had caught the issue early enough to make the necessary adjustments. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but at least they were back on track. With the support of his team, Jerry knew they could grow without losing sight of what made them special. It was a delicate balance, but one they were determined to maintain. The future was uncertain, but Jerry was more confident than ever that they had the right people, the right values, and the right vision to succeed. The test wasn't over yet, but they had passed the first round. And that was enough to give Jerry hope for what lay ahead. The dealership hummed with a renewed energy. The team, once frazzled by the pressure of the transition, had come together with a shared sense of purpose. Sales were steady, customers were returning with a sense of trust, and the tension that had plagued Jerry began to dissipate. The balance between personal service and the demands of growth was still delicate, but it felt like they were finally finding their rhythm. As the weeks passed, the partnership with Autoline Investments began to feel less like an overwhelming change and more like a natural evolution of the dealership's legacy. Shaq's leadership, combined with Jerry's unwavering dedication to the team, was a perfect blend that allowed the dealership to continue to thrive. Emily was at the heart of it all, constantly checking in with staff, making sure morale was high and everyone felt heard. Together, they created a new environment, one that felt modern yet familiar, one that kept the heart of the dealership intact while welcoming the future. But even as the dealership flourished, Jerry couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was still on the horizon. They had weathered the storm and emerged stronger, but the test wasn't truly over. Not until they could prove that they had not only adapted but innovated. One evening, as Jerry sat in his office reviewing the month's performance reports, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Shaq. Shaq, got a big meeting tomorrow with the Autoline board. Think we're ready to take the next step? Jerry looked out of his office window, watching the dealership's neon lights flicker in the distance. For the first time in weeks, he felt a surge of excitement. They weren't just maintaining the dealership's culture anymore, they were expanding it, taking it to the next level. The next morning, the board meeting was set. Jerry and Shaq arrived at Autoline's sleek corporate office in downtown Chicago, the kind of place Jerry never thought he'd walk into a few years ago. He had spent his career focused on the day-to-day operations of the dealership, always working in the trenches, but today felt different. It felt like the first real step into the future. The room was filled with executives from Autoline Investments, all sharply dressed and seated around a glossy conference table. At the head of the table sat Ben, the CEO of Autoline, who had been the face of the investment partnership from the start. His steely eyes locked with Jerry's as they shook hands. "Welcome, Jerry." "Shaq," Ben said, his voice smooth but commanding. "I trust the dealership has been doing well under the new structure." "It's been an adjustment, but things are moving in the right direction," Jerry replied, his voice steady. "We've made sure to keep our focus on what matters, our customers, our team, and our reputation." Ben nodded approvingly. "Good to hear. Now, let's talk about the future. We're not just looking to expand your dealership, we want to set a new standard for the industry. We've been looking at ways to integrate cutting-edge technology, sustainable practices, and a customer-first mentality across all of our dealerships. But we also recognize that the personal touch, the family-oriented values, are your strong suit. We need to find a way to combine all of that, innovation and tradition. Jerry felt a surge of confidence. This was the moment he had been waiting for, the chance to show that he had a vision for the future, one that blended the best of both worlds. We've been thinking about this for a while, Jerry began. We want to create a hybrid model. One that takes the latest technology, everything from online sales platforms to virtual showrooms, and combines it with the personal service we're known for. We'll offer a seamless experience for customers, whether they're shopping in person or from their living rooms. But, at the same time, we'll make sure that every transaction is backed by the same care and attention we've always provided. Shaq jumped in, his voice booming with enthusiasm. Exactly. We've got the team in place to make this work, and with Autoline support, we can take the dealership to the next level. This isn't just about more cars on the lot, it's about creating an experience that customers will want to come back to, over and over. Ben's expression softened as he listened. That's what I want to hear. You're not just selling cars, you're selling an experience. A community. And that's the future of the automotive industry. If you can make that happen, I believe we have something special. There was a brief silence in the room as Ben exchanged glances with his team. Then, with a smile, he turned back to Jerry and Shaq. All right. Let's do this. I think we're ready to take the next step in this partnership. We'll be rolling out this new model across all of our dealerships, starting with yours. You've got my full support. Jerry and Shaq exchanged a look of disbelief. This was the breakthrough they had been waiting for. Not only had they kept their values intact, but they had also convinced Autoline to embrace a vision of the future that was rooted in customer care and innovation. As the meeting ended, Jerry couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. It wasn't just about the success of the dealership anymore, it was about the legacy they were building. The vision they had for a modern dealership experience, one that didn't sacrifice what made them unique, was now a reality. Later that afternoon, back at the dealership, Jerry gathered the team together to share the news. Everyone was eager to hear what had happened in the meeting, and Jerry could feel the anticipation in the air as they gathered in the conference room. We've got some big news, Jerry began, his voice filled with excitement. Autoline's on board with our vision for the future. We're going to be the first dealership to roll out a new, hybrid model that combines technology with the personal touch we've always been known for. This is our chance to set a new standard for the industry. The room erupted into applause, and Jerry could see the pride in their eyes. They had made it. Not only had they adapted to the changes brought by Autoline, but they had also shaped the direction of the company, ensuring that their values remained at the forefront. As the celebration continued, Jerry stepped back and looked around the room. It had been a long road, full of challenges and moments of doubt. But now, standing on the brink of something new, he knew they had made the right decision. The future was bright. And together, they were ready to face whatever came next. With Shaq, Emily, and the rest of the team by his side, Jerry felt confident that they could navigate the evolving landscape of the automotive industry without ever losing sight of what mattered most, their customers, their community, and the family they had built. The road ahead was uncharted, but Jerry knew one thing for certain: they were ready to drive into the future together. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?